Heavenly Father, today we put on the full armor to protect us against attack. We put on the belt of truth to protect against lies and deception. We put on the breastplate of righteousness to protect our hearts from the temptations. We put the gospel of peace on our feet to walk in your light, peace, and freedom with the Holy Spirit. We rebuke anxious thoughts. We take up your shield of faith for protection to block and destroy all the darts and threats thrown at us by the enemy. We put on the helmet of salvation to cover our minds and thoughts, reminding us that we are children of a mighty King. We are forgiven, set free, saved by the blood of Jesus. We take up the sword of the Spirit, your living word, that has the power to demolish strongholds and is sharper than any double-edged sword. We come to you, Lord, in prayer daily. In Jesus' mighty name we pray. Amen. What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and I'm honored to have back on the show our featured presenter for our Tuesday night weekly podcast therapeutic event, certified clinical trauma professional, certified sex offender treatment provider, licensed professional counselor, founder of Survivor Support and Church Protect, podcast host of his own podcast and 2 YouTube channels, at John K. Uhler, LPC, and at Unmasking the Trans Movement, father of 3, husband to his high school sweetheart, survivor advocate, professional knapsack and boulder remover, whistleblower, and someone we are so blessed to have on the battlefield with us, John Uhler. In case you're new here or missed John's briefing on his background on the first episode we did together, here's a short recap of John's many accolades and credentials. John's work began over 30 years ago, and his education includes attending Epic Bible College, Biola University, Talbot School of Theology, and California State University in Fullerton. He's worked in both clinical and administrative capacities, outpatient and hospital settings, intensive day treatment settings, residential treatment programs, and insecure facilities, including over 11 years on psychology staff within the Pennsylvania Department of Corrections, where he's logged more clinical contact hours within solitary confinement than any psych staff in the entire United States. Prior to his work with incarcerated men, John spent years working with sexual abuse survivors and treating severely emotionally disturbed adolescents in group homes and within the largest intensive psychiatric residential treatment facility for troubled youth west of the Mississippi. When John is not providing professional therapy or podcasting, he serves in an advocacy role towards helping increase safety for vulnerable women and minors who are being placed in harm's way by those pushing dangerous ideologies, public policies, and legislation. If you've been following along each week with John as our resident therapist here on Tuesday nights on the Imagination podcast, you know he has been taking us on a journey of healing, awareness, and education based off his experiences working in solitary confinement with the most deviant of predators, as well as his time working with survivors of extreme trauma. We, the listeners, get firsthand insights into both sides of the abuse spectrum, as well as informative course of actions towards getting therapy and knowing what to expect from your therapist. John's lessons and teachings each week are helping to paint the foundation needed for survivors to get real help. Unfortunately, there is a lack of trauma-informed professionals in both the therapeutic community as well as within the church, and John's work is helping to bridge the gap between the professional and the survivor. We absolutely need more trauma-informed education within the spaces where survivors go for help, and it's going to be heroes like John who help get us there. This series has also tackled some important issues, such as systems and parts, overcoming shame and guilt, journaling, overcoming triggers, understanding the mind of the world's most deviant predators, and so much more. I highly encourage you guys to listen and share this series with others, as I truly believe what John is presenting each week is a huge piece to this puzzle we are trying to put together here on this podcast. Awareness is just the first step. After that, we need to learn how to heal ourselves and the world, and I'm so grateful John's work is helping us to do just that. So please put away whatever you're doing and give this hero your full attention as we venture further down the therapeutic rabbit hole. Before I finish introducing today's guest, I wanted to give just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be on the podcast as a guest or share any information privately with me, you can email me at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com. You can also use this email if you'd like to be a part of my new book series featuring written survivor testimonies, and you can find the video with all the details on how to submit your testimony on any of my podcast channels. And lastly, I'd love your support on Substack, where I've taken up investigative journalism as an outlet for me to share about my podcast guests and advocacy work. And you can subscribe to me there at www.emmacatherine.substack.com. All my links are in the show notes, and I'd love your support across all platforms. Thank you all for caring so deeply about survivors and whistleblowers, and for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor and whistleblower disclosures. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, selfless man of God, voice for the voiceless, child abuse and survivor advocate, podcaster and content creator, Satan slayer, pedophile exposer, protector of the vulnerable, and therapeutic warrior, the one, the only, John K. Uhler. John, thank you so much for being here with us again today.
Emma, it's good to be back with you. Thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you too. It's really fun. We get to do this work together too and sort of combine forces. You know, the series has been really valuable. I told you just a couple examples, but I'm getting therapists that are watching and commenting. I'm having survivors say that the series is helping them heal from the inside out and build meaningful relationships and cohesion within their systems and with their parts. And I'm also getting people who, really want sort of a gentle approach to understanding what a survivor is or what satanic ritual abuse is, but sometimes the testimonies can be a little intense. And so me and others have been sending those people, especially survivors who are just waking up, your series. And I've been getting such good feedback on that, it's hard to learn about this stuff without diving into the complete darkness, and so you offer more of a high level clinical way that we can look at this, where it sort of feels like we're in a classroom learning something versus, being really emotional and traumatized the whole time, kind of going on these testimony journeys that can sometimes be really hard, although they're so beautiful to listen to, how somebody can overcome all of that and, to take in that miracle. But I just want to thank you for your work because it's really important what you're doing. You're laying a true groundwork for people in your field to follow. And I just see really big things coming from this work that you're doing and the fact that you're doing it publicly. I really think that you're going to help pioneer a change in your industry, which is really exciting, and now we have people that know about this that can help push for it in their communities and, sort of help be advocates for this change in the therapeutic community and church. So thank you, John. And I'm really happy to continue down this journey again today. And as usual, if it's okay with you, I thought we would start with a question from a listener.
Let's do it, by all means.
Okay, cool. I'm going to get the picture up just as a little reference. But I thought this was an interesting question that I haven't had covered as far as the why behind it. But I think every survivor and person listening is going to think that this sounds familiar because you've heard this on my show. But the question was, why do some people's different parts have names? I have many parts, but even in conflict, having to choose, there hasn't been a need for separate names. It's all me. But I get it if someone was split by severe SRA or specifically guided by abusers. So I thought that was a good question. Just essentially, what purpose do names serve for different parts?
There you go. What I would say is whatever works. First of all, I want to take a very pragmatic approach. What fits for one person won't necessarily fit for the other. Now, what we're going to be looking at tonight is probably what's going to fit for everybody, especially if they have gone through SRA or MK Ultra. But anybody that has gone through severe trauma, typically from sexual abuse. So what we are presenting now in this kind of a series within a series will be applicable for everyone. But the issue of names, so excellent question. When I'm working with someone, and most people, most survivors, as I am working with them, and by the way, again, I want to make myself available. If someone has had a difficult time finding a therapist, on occasion, I have room in my my caseload. So reach out and we'll see if we can get you scheduled. So that's an option for you. But as I work with folks, and oftentimes or more times than not, they will be aware that they have parts, or some won't. Right? They're either at the very beginning, and we're going to talk about, again, the beginning stage tonight. They may be aware of some of the dialogue. Usually they are, but they've chalked it up to self-talk. Or you may have some folks, survivors, that are very much aware that they have parts, and therefore they're relieved to find a therapist that is very familiar with this. But more times than not, those survivors that are aware of the different parts, most have not found names. So it's very common. It can be kind of taking things to the next level in a way. Now, if this doesn't fit, I don't want anybody to worry. And just kind of be in the process wherever you're at. So I don't want to say this is the right way that someone should progress. But generally speaking, what you will find is this. If there are parts, they are a part of you, and therefore they are a person. That may sound funny, but if they're a part of your personality, meaning your personality got segmented through trauma. So in a way, it is you. Well, how would you like to be addressed? And typically what you're going to find is parts of you would like to actually be addressed. Now, initially, and depending upon what happened and the degree of threat, they don't want to be known. But that's different regarding whether or not they have a name, have an actual identity. Most times, more times than not, and so I'm pretty persuaded, but again, I don't want anybody to worry, right? If they don't sense a name, if no name is coming up, don't work at that. Right? What I would say is be open to it. Most times, regardless if someone is unaware of, or they think it's strange, or they don't feel a need, given enough time, that those parts will actually let themselves be known to the person. Oftentimes, if someone says what the person that submitted the question, oftentimes what is really going on, now again, I'm not going to question the person, this is their own experience. So if someone says, I just don't have names, I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm not going to tell them, right, that, oh, come on, you have names, just kind of get with the program and find out the names. No. But more times than not, that indicates, but again, kind of go with whatever, this is all just a means to an end, so you can get to know you. Okay? Oftentimes, one of the key hurdles, and we'll actually talk about it tonight, one of the key hurdles is coming to fully accept that these parts are real, and actually being comfortable with it. And not only comfortable with it, but really inviting communication and welcoming it. Once you get to that point, more times than not, you're going to find that the parts will choose a name, or they'll disclose their name. So if you don't have a name, all right, if your parts don't have a name, that's okay. I'm not here to tell you you have to have names or should have or go hunting for names. What I would suggest is this: find out. And how you do that is kind of what we've talked about a few episodes ago, and with journaling. That's really, really valuable. As a matter of fact, I don't believe somebody can truly heal until they do journaling, because that's where you're going to really begin to dialogue with yourself in such a way where you're going to actually see responses. And what that'll do on the inside is it will put you in for lack of a better term, and hopefully this will feel good, right? You'll get in a flow state where you're not critiquing yourself. And it is in that state that the left and right brain are starting to connect. We could talk about alpha, beta, delta waves, but just what I say is this: just allow yourself to relax. And this may sound funny, enjoy the process. Right, we're dealing with trauma. That's not enjoyable, but you're going to begin to get to know yourself. And as that happens, I think it's reasonable for you to ask that part, is there a name? Now, remember, the parts know you better than you know the parts. And the parts know if you have the brakes on, or if you're not all that really on board. And so if they're going to respond in such a way, even though you say you want to know, they know if you don't want to know. So if you really don't want to know, they're not going to disclose. But if you really want to know, don't you think they want you to know who they are? So I would say, generally speaking, parts typically have names. Some of the names they will have been given, especially if they're dealing with some of the more heinous kind of stuff. So with that, there's kind of an additional process, which is possibly letting them choose a new name. But there's that's further kind of into the middle stage, because by doing that, the survivor and their parts are having to wrestle with a lot of stuff. And talk about breaking ties. So that's sort of in the middle stage. We'll talk about that a little bit tonight as well. So what I would say is, number one, don't worry about it. Don't get hung up over that. The goal is free flow of information. Meaning, are you familiar with your parts? Are you okay with having parts? We'll talk about that again tonight. That's perfect. Segue. And then, I would say this: just risk. If you can do handwriting, some people, maybe because of physical limitations, if there's paralysis or whatnot, they may not be able to use their arms, so they will type. But if somebody is ambulatory, I would say risk by asking questions in general, number one, but then you want to invite them. If you care to, would you tell me who you are after you write? Sign your name. And more times than not, I would say almost without exception, you're going to get some names. And then what's nice also in therapy, then you can, and especially when you go, here's this, when you are making your system map, your internal map. We've talked about that on a previous episode, Emma. If they don't have names, then who are you going to refer to? Because ideally, you want to be able to find a picture of them. So if they have a picture, then there's usually going to be a name. Oftentimes, if there's no name, you're going to have a very difficult time doing an internal map. Are there some clients that I never go there with? Correct. Because at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Does the person have access? If they're not at that point, it probably tells me that they're not at that point. Right. So it's not up to me to start kind of forcing that, especially if they've gone through. So the person asking the question says, evidently they haven't gone through the most severe kind of abuse, and they're fortunate, right? So go with what works, what fits. But for those that have gone through really heinous stuff, oftentimes, it's that barrier that if they start disclosing their names, it's getting closer to it being real. It's getting closer to vulnerability. And that's part of the process in therapy. So on the one hand, don't worry about the names. On the other hand, be open to it.
Good answer. I wanted to add to you while you were saying that, I had memory of my a guest that I had on my show a couple times. Her name's Jean Eisenhower, and she explained in her own words that she has two different sets of alters. One are organic alters that happened and they weren't programmed. It was just her reacting to trauma, and a part of her personality broke off, but it never was given a task, a name. And so it's just sort of in there floating around her, she said, and it's just her. And then she said that there's other parts that were specifically uh, fractured and split that somebody else named and gave them tasks, and they used the names to like call that alter forward whenever that task was supposed to be, completed, or if they were supposed to do something. So her handlers would call out whatever the name or keyword is, and she'd switch into that alter. The alter would come forward after hearing its name, and then it would go through with, whatever, if it was, prostitution or whatever it was that it was supposed to do. So she was also saying that, acknowledging basically what you were, that some parts can be given names if it's like very intentional, and then other parts can fracture on their own, and they're not as finitely defined as a personality as a trained, programmed and specifically named alter. So,
Matter of fact, Emma, let me speak to that.
yeah.
What I would say is, for those parts that were just that occurred from, isn't it hard, it's horrible to say normal trauma. There's no normal
There's
trauma.
no
We're talking
normal,
about sexual
no.
abuse. Yeah. I would still be inclined to suggest that the client, certainly the perps, they know how to do this, right? They're creating the parts, and so they will name them. But I still tend to believe even the spontaneous parts, as a result of, just sexual abuse that wasn't by SRA or MK Ultra. I'm still pretty convinced. And those parts will have names oftentimes. Now, again, doesn't have to. I'm pretty convinced most parts have names. And they will let you know what their name is, because it will stem from part of you. So it might be interesting for her. I'm not suggesting she should or shouldn't, but it might be interesting to find out. Because if she has, and I'm not even so much talking about her, but this may be food for thought, it'll help with some processing. If she has some parts that do have names that were given to her, so therefore part of the challenge would be, what name would you like? Let's discard that. What you're going to find is these names will fit, and they will actually come from the personality. So they'll be nicknames, they'll be a variation of the person's name, or they'll be the name of somebody that was supportive or helpful or protective in their life. So even the spontaneous ones, I tend to feel that they will have names. Doesn't have to, right? But if I was a survivor and if I notice I dissociate, meaning lose track of time, then probably that part that is out, if you get to know that part and you give that part an opportunity to say who you're talking to, don't be surprised that suddenly a name will appear, or you'll hear a name, and then you'll know. So there you go.
Good answers. That was a really good question too. Like I said, I haven't done like too much of a deep dive on that. And you've obviously worked with people on all ends of that spectrum, from not knowing names to having, 100 of them that you're getting to know. So it's fascinating also hearing it from your perspective. And I'm super excited about this chart tonight. We've been working on it the last couple of weeks, and you always, in good John Uhler fashion, create these really in-depth and detailed graphics for us that we get to look at. We get to have visuals that we follow along with what you're saying. So I'll let you go ahead and lead the way with that, and we can transition into that segment. And I know everybody's going to be really excited to build on what we've been working on the last couple of weeks regarding sort of what to expect going into therapy, and seeing the different aspects of troubleshooting things that could go wrong and right.
There we go. Well, we'll pick it up where we left off last time. I know I reviewed maybe a little bit more than I had intended to last time, but we'll share the screen and we'll get going on this. So we're picking up where we left off last time. Let me get some of these little numbers out. If anybody's familiar with PowerPoint, right? That's for the wow factor. So just
Thank you
in
for
brief,
putting all this together too for
right?
us.
So the question is, and this will show you where right? I didn't get that one numbered quite right, but people will recognize if they were here, if they've been following in successive order. So if this does not look familiar, go back to the previous session. But we're really looking at the stages of therapy. And so where we went last time, I'll just bring them up real fast. So what blockages, what things will get in the way? I'm going to bring it up to where we ended last time. So the reason for, no, I don't want to give away the next, there we are. So the reason we're doing this sort of offshoot, the series within a series, is we initially were looking at the parts chart. We're going to come back to that, but to help people really get a sense of the primary parts, the primary everyday parts, and those secondary parts with the chart, we're looking at that blue section. As a matter of fact, let me bring that up. I'll get out of this just for a moment. Let me see if I can. I should have had this prepared, sorry, but for those that don't recall, and I recommend you go back and start at the beginning, because we were looking at this chart. Okay, so what we're doing is we're looking at the blue, really, what's going on, both co-conscious, subconscious. What you're going to find is during therapy, that is going to be the focus during it's called the early or beginning stages of therapy. It's easier to think in terms of beginning, but depending upon how someone works through this, how effectively, shall we say, somebody could actually be in the beginning stage for years, and you don't want to do that. So maybe it's best to call it the early stage. So during the time where you're getting to know these other parts, the primary parts of you, what we're calling, or IFS calls them the managers. So think of the light to darker blue. That's really going to be what's happening in the beginning stages. The middle stage, which we will get to, okay? That's when, and I've heard from people, they're waiting, and I understand, and it will be, this is the primary crux of it, right? As we're looking at the repressed or the firefighters, repressed parts, the unconscious or amnesic roles. So that'll be in the middle stage. So we're going to get back to that, but I wanted to have people get a sense of, okay, since they know that part of what's going to happen in the beginning stage is you're going to be looking at really the first layer of those parts. So I figured, you know what, let's really look at then what you can anticipate, because it's not just the parts that you're going to be looking at, although that is, okay, so I'll play it again. So we'll see the walls come up. And this is important because as you progress, you're going to, as we talked about last time, there's going to be very predictable places at which the progress will slow down if you're normal. Yeah, I don't want you to worry about it, but it can be discouraging. It can be disconcerting for both therapist and, or I'm sorry, for client and therapist. Okay, so we talked about there'll be ambivalence, and we looked at some of those issues. Self-shaming. So the first, ambivalence, not really sure. There, it's going to be, you know what, I really should be stronger than this. Self-blaming. There's going to be the negative self-talk, but even more than that. Second guessing, you know, is this really right? What am I doing, right? About counseling, then resisting, acknowledging the parts. Because as you're moving into this beginning stage, what's happening? You're starting to become aware of the parts more. And just as we talked about, do the parts have names? So that's going to be acknowledging the parts. And then the last part is, pardon the pun, is self-sabotaging. So a couple different ways, but ultimately stopping the therapeutic process. So somebody could slow this down, and you could be, now hopefully it's, if you find a good therapist, then it's not necessarily the therapist's fault. Now, I'm not going to say it's somebody's fault. Okay. Oh, hold on. Okay. But let's say you have a therapist that's fairly competent, then it's going to be the client. It's going to be you putting the brakes on things. How long could somebody be in the early stage of therapy? For years? Like how many years? 10, 15 years? Oftentimes in that, what I'll find is somebody's gone through a few therapists or an inpatient program or outpatient program. And so part of it also may be that they have not had trauma-informed therapy and somebody that understands parts, because you can find a trauma-informed therapist that doesn't necessarily understand really all about parts. They just know that trauma runs deep and it'll affect a lot of how the brain works, right? Hypervigilance and things like that. Okay, so these will be the typical hindrances, and then we saw under at the bottom, right? What are the underlying dynamics part of what's going on in each of these roadblocks or hindrances? Is there's a testing of the therapeutic relationship, a lot of borderline personality characteristics, and then inner turmoil. Why? Because as truth is starting to surface, what's happening? That middle layer, the firefighters are starting to get engaged because the little ones, the wounded ones, are starting to come up. They're starting to release memories. They're getting past the defenses and they're coming to the surface. And that is where some of the early warning, the inner turmoil, some of the inner threats will come from at that point in time. So as I mentioned before, really a good way to view this process of therapy is to think in terms of a football field. Now, for those not in the US, you probably reference this as US football because it's not soccer, but think about soccer, right? We have goals on either end, and we're going to move the ball from one end of the field down to the other. So you have soccer, you have basketball, you have hockey, right? So you've got your goal and the other goal. So if you're familiar with American football, NFL, or college, I don't know if this looks like high school to me. You have the kickoff and it goes from one end to the other, and your team will catch it. Let's say you're not going to do a touch back, right? You don't bring it out to the 20. Let's say you start at the 2-yard line. So that would be over on the left. As a matter of fact, I'll bring up there we go. So picture therapy as starting kind of about the 2-yard line. Okay, and what's the goal? We're going to move from one end of the field to the other. And what's important to know is there are stages, just like if you're a coach. So let's say you're on the sidelines of one of these. So oftentimes I will reference myself as a coach. And so I picture the perpetrators, those that harmed you, were over on this side, and they have their people that were calling the plays. And so now I come along and I'm coming alongside you, and I'm your coach over here. Now, I'm a very active coach, but also I don't necessarily call the plays. If anybody's familiar with NFL football, oftentimes you'll have the coach over on the sidelines send plays in. They're going to call the next play. Right? That's they can either do it by hand signals. They do it. I'm just thinking in terms of sports, right? So that would be a coach that is directing every step along the way. I think the best way to view proper therapy for survivors is that the coach is going to allow the quarterback to always call the plays. Now, I as a coach may give suggestions, may advise, but it's always, I want to empower the quarterback. And by the way, here's a little trivia. During the beginning stage, which I will show you, you're actually not in the game, but you need to get in the game. So there are parts that we've been talking about that has been managing And oftentimes what's happening is you may be on the field for just a moment and then you come off the field. So your players, those that have, anybody's familiar with it, there's 11 players there. They've been operating without you as the quarterback, and you've got very competent players. They've been doing the best they can, but they never have a huddle. And when it feels chaotic, there's sort of a hurry up offense. That means without a huddle, they're trying to run these plays, and those that are substituting in for you doing the best they can. But sometimes what'll happen is, well, oftentimes it's not working very well. You've got competent players all over the field, but that's what it ends up feeling like, right? It's all over the field, and you're dropping the ball, and it's just it feels like such a struggle. So what you need then is somebody who can, now look at where this camera is taken from. I'm sorry, this photo. See how this photo is way up there? This could be a drone, but let's pretend, we see the bleachers right there, the seats. Now this is probably the home side. Usually this is home. This would be the visitors. So the Buccaneers, this is their school. Everybody who's from there sits there. Now let's pretend, and they usually do have the press box or where the announcer sits. And so let's say we are up in the press box. If you've ever seen an actual professional game, you look way up there, and who's up there? Well, you've got the TV announcers, but you have other people that have paid a lot of money for these nice warm boxes in the wintertime or cool boxes in the summertime. But you also have the coaching staff. So it's very interesting that you've got coaching staff. If you've ever seen this kind of football, all the players are in the blue here, right? Some are sitting, some are standing. You've got the jugs of Gatorade that are going to be poured over the coach. What happened there? Sorry, let me bring that back. Oh, I'm doing a little mouse here, right? So if you've ever watched, okay, what happens if your side wins? Well, I guess it's become tradition for somebody to sneak up with the big jug of Gatorade and douse the coach from behind. Okay, so they kind of always do that. But as far as you see the white, let me bring this up without changing. Okay, see the white strip? Now, there's a rule on the field, and the rule is, where did my mouse go here? If I can bring it up, there we go, that the players aren't supposed to be on here. Why? That's kind of no man's land, so that nobody interferes. So if players get on there, they're going to get in trouble. But usually standing in that beige area are the coaches. So you're going to have the head coach, you're going to have some assistant coaches. But if you've ever watched the game, the cameraman will direct the camera, where's my little mouse, up top to some people that have headsets on that look very official, and they will be referenced as coordinators. Okay, so those are people that are, sorry, where my mouse is, there we go. And the question is, why are those people up top? Why aren't they on the field with the rest of the coaches? And the answer would be what? That's right. They are given perspective. So they can see the entire field. Big difference between when you're on the field versus when you can see the entire lay of the land. So those of you that are survivors, guess where you are? You're on the field. Well, most of you is, right? Part of you is kind of sitting over here, the benches, without knowing it. When you don't remember what's happening, you're kind of sitting on the bench. So those gaps of time, we could say you, for no other reason, it was not qualitative, right? We're not going to say you should or shouldn't, because ideally you want to be in the game, but right. Boy, my mouse is having an issue. Okay, so you're over there. So we've got to get you off the sidelines and back into the game. During the healing process, you will eventually be in the game more and more. So you'll go from an unconscious level to a conscious level. Now, some of you have always been co-conscious. Strangely enough, it may seem like you're co-conscious, but in a way, you got one foot in the game, one foot out. And what you'll find is, as we'll talk about, part of the goal will be during the first stage of therapy, and that's what we're going to look at. You want to actually notice yourself going more unconscious now, or noticing gaps of time where you're not aware. And the reason for that is you want to find that the parts are letting themselves be known to you. And they're going to do that by showing you that you're not as in control as you thought, and they really are there. And there's some other reasons why. Okay, so therapy then, in my estimation, has a beginning, middle, and end, and we're going somewhere. So picture you're down here, if I can get my mouse there, right? So you're down here, you're taking the ball at the 2-yard line, and you need to move it all the way 198 yards, right, into the end zone. So that's where we're going. And what does that look like? Well, that looks like, there we go. We've got early stage. Come on, that's a little wow factor, you have to admit. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got the early stage, the working stage. Now, it's not that work's not being done, it's all work. I was going to call it what seems to make sense, right? We'll call it the middle stage. What I want to say is the kind of work you're going to be doing in the middle stage is work. Okay, there's going to be work in all the stages, but that is when just it gets super, super hard. Okay, right there in the middle. So the early stage, we're going to look at what constitutes the early stage. But what I want you to see is this. Now, this is just me kind of giving you my own subjective sense that I think the early stage goes from the 1-yard line, right? You've picked up the ball, you started therapy, you started your own process, and it goes anywhere from the 35 to the 40. So I put it out about the 40. Now, here's the important thing to remember, that progress from the 2-yard line, 1-yard line to the 40, the pace ultimately depends upon you. I know some people that have been in that early stage, they never made it beyond the 40 after 5 years, 8 years, 10, even 15. I'm not faulting anybody, right? But they come in and you can imagine how they're feeling, because let's say they've been in therapy for a while and they've gone through a number of therapists or a number of different programs, and they feel stuck. Probably they don't know it. The reason they feel stuck is they are aware, right? There's kind of this force field, this invisible line at about 35 or 40-yard line, their own. See the little arrow? Those of you familiar with football, you'll see the arrow. It's what we call your own, your 30. And this is the opponent's, right? Because that means you crossed midfield. This is also for the camera when they zoom in. You want to know, okay, how close is that our 40 or is that their 40? Okay. So what I would say is this: regardless of how long you've been in therapy, we're going to look at what defines the early stage. And if after you see what I'm going to show you, you find out, wait a second, you mean I'm still in the early stage? I don't want you to get discouraged, because what it's going to mean is you'll have the ability then to move yourself through this into the next stage. So there's kind of a key issue that will define or distinguish or differentiate between the early and the working stage. Okay, but what I wanted you to see is this. Just subjectively, I'm putting this at about the early stage, the 35 or the 40. Now you notice it's not equidistant, because there's 100 yards, so that would be, well, that's about like 32, I guess. Oh, what happened? Let me bring that back. There we go. Okay. These are not equal in terms of distance. This is process and things that need to be accomplished. Okay. The working stage, I put it at about the 40 all the way to what? Across midfield, there's 50, down to the 40, down to the 30, down to about the 20. It's probably going to be the primary key work. That's the hardest work. And then things will get better. And that's going to be in the latter stage. And that's about 20-yard line. So you've gone about 80 yards. Okay, so I want you to think about, if you've never done therapy and you're just starting to have this stuff resonate with you, kind of picture it like this. Now, how long does it take? I would say, think in terms of the early stage. If you've really been through some stuff, you're probably talking at least a year. Okay, now, I don't want you to get discouraged. It's just the reality that all things being equal, if you were really, really horribly used and abused, it makes sense. It's gonna take a few years, to be honest. Okay. The third year, so it's going to take probably 3 years. That's probably something to brace for, engage. Now, how often, we talked about this before, the more you can have sessions, the more you keep working, the more you stay at it. We've given suggestions in the past. What are some of the homework assignments that you can do? It should be journaling. It should be working on your system map. It should be doing a timeline. It should be venting. And it should be staying in the material. That's what survivorsupport.net, my website, that's what that's all about. If you stay in the material on a daily basis, you will make progress. So you can move progress as fast as you want to, but there's only so much you can do, but there's a lot you can do. So Rome was not built in a day. You won't get through this in a day, but you can speed this up to where you really can make progress. I have one client right now, gone through some of the most horrific stuff I've ever heard of. I've been doing this a while. And in 3 months, now she was pretty darn far. She was getting a lot of memories. Within 3 months, 4 months, she herself, with the work she was doing, she already had moved herself into the early stage a fair amount, right? So you don't necessarily need a therapist up to a point, probably in the working stage you're going to need to. Now, with this series that you're doing, will I say you can almost do it with this series? Pretty close, but you're still gonna need a coach. You're gonna need a therapist. Why? Because when the going gets tough and you're slugging it out right in the middle of the field and it's downpouring rain and it's sleet and it's hail and it's fog and you're gonna need somebody on the outside. So the working stage, you're gonna need somebody. But the pace at which she's working now, she fortunately is at a stage in her life where she can devote full time. She doesn't have kids and she can devote this. She's spending sometimes 6 hours a day. And it shows. Okay? Now, not everybody can do that. Don't get discouraged. But can you do something each day? You're going to need to do something. As a matter of fact, if you don't do something each day, it's going to start to get kind of bad. Why? Because you're getting closer to truth. You are taking a little bulldozer. You've got truth under the surface, which is an emotional pus wound. It's like that pocket of oil, that volleyball underwater. It's wanting to come to the surface, and you have stratified a layer that you've layered things to keep the pressure in, to keep the truth away at arm's length. And with each droplet of truth, with each new insight that you're learning, it's like a bulldozer that's kind of taking off layers of soil. Well, if it's coming up with 50 pounds per square inch and you move just enough soil, strata, what's going to happen? All of a sudden it starts to dislodge, and it'll send shock waves. And so you hate to wish it upon somebody. It's just the way it works. But it's a good sign. So that's why we say it's going to get worse before it gets better. But if you know it, so in the early stage, in a way, it starts to get worse before it gets better. And in the working stage, it gets really worse. But you now have help, which is your internal system. So think in terms of 3 stages, and you're moving the ball down the field, and hopefully your coach understands this kind of analogy. When I work with the clients that I work with, I'm their coach, and I'm really active, and I'm always strategizing on their behalf, because I'm envisioning the perps who harmed you, the perps that did stuff to you. I envision them on the other side, and they have playbooks. So the MK Ultra, SRA, the evil people, they know what they're doing. They pattern themselves after certain things. They have certain plays they run. They did certain things that are predictable. Now, the exact thing they did to you may be different than another perp, but they're doing it for a reason. They're doing it for shock value. They're doing it as a means to an end. So there are, as it were, there are plays they run. They have, for each of these stages, they've got like the white binder and the blue binder and the red binder for the first quarter, second quarter, third quarter. There's 4 quarters in football. So they're very methodical. I've read their playbook, so to speak. Now, what do I mean by that? Because I'm still learning about MK Ultra. I'm still learning about the Masons and what they do, this secret society. And if the Masons want to get out of having their reputation as a haven for perps, then no more secrecy. Open the doors, open your books up. No more oaths, no more taking blood oaths, no more of this, no more of this, no more cut your tongue out. No, no. So the burden of proof is on you. Don't give me this thing about, no, it's myth, but we can't tell you because the very first time the initiant, the very first time I've been learning all sorts of stuff. When he comes in with the noose around his neck, it's trailing, and he's got his shirt off and his pant leg rolled up, what are you doing with him? And you point the little sword at his throat. The whole thing is vile. So no secrets. If you got secrets, there's a reason why, and I say you're a perp or perp apologist. Simple as that. Jesus never had secrets, did he? He said, go into all the world. What I've given to you, I've given freely. Go give to one another. Whatever's done in secret will be what? Shouted from the housetop. So, and especially if you're a Christian, you should never be in, because I just learned this. There's 2 things that are never supposed to be done in the lodge. Oh, see, I'm learning a lot. What do they say? Oh, I'm learning. Okay. You're not supposed to talk about what? Oh, yeah, I've learned it. What is it? So no Christian can be a part of this. You can't talk about politics and religion. Oh, there you go. So much for this Great Commission. You are a pathetic Christian. You couldn't. If you're a true Christian, you cannot. If somebody tells you, don't talk about your faith, don't evangelize, you can't be in that. So if you're a Christian, I'll just say this, you're not a Christian if you're in there. And nobody should have to tell you that. Because automatically, if you get saved, born again, you become a Christian, whatever term you want to use, right? The Lord's gotten a hold of your life. You're a new creation. What do you want to do? What's natural? You're going to spread the gospel. You're about the Great Commission. Nobody has to tell you, right? You don't have to take evangelism classes because it's the nearest and dearest thing to you. And so the only thing that happens is people ask you, hey, can you tone it down? Right? That it's as natural as breathing. So you mean to tell me you joined a group? I don't need to know anything else about this group. Well, there's a lot of stuff, right? Okay. But if you're told, hey, as a Christian, you can join this group, but no talking politics or what? Or your faith? And that doesn't repel you? You're not a Christian. I hate to tell you. Why? Because a Christian by nature wants to share what the Lord's done for them. You can't not say it. So I hate to tell you, if you can be comfortable, right? This is the most surface level thing about the Masons that I learned. If you go to church and you are comfortable with somebody saying you can't talk about religion, that means you can't talk about the Lord. If you're okay with that, you're not a Christian. I hate to tell you, I'm not calling you names. I'm just saying no Christian is going to say, oh, okay, I'm okay with that. You're not okay with it. Why? Because the Lord will bring out of you, right? Because we want to seek and save the lost. So I just want to let you know, there are no true Christians in Masonry, because if somebody tells you, keep your mouth shut, now what are you going to do? You're going to compromise? So no Baptist church, no church should have any Masons. So pastors, by the way, if you have any Masons in your church, you have at best super compromising Christians that aren't Christians, because a Christian can't keep his mouth shut. So I've heard of churches where they hold Masonic stuff. So no, zero. You want to debate with that? Come on and we'll debate with that. So there's no such thing as a Christian who's a Mason, because no Christian's going to keep his mouth shut, because that means you're not being persecuted, are you? Well, you can't even fulfill the Great Commission, and you can't fulfill the Beatitudes. So there, that's an aside. Where was I? Okay, so we're at the early stages. So, okay, so we're going to look at now early stage. Oh, we'll get more into Freemasonry, the stuff that I've learned, and people that I'm working with. Oh, that's what I was talking about, survivors. So I'm sorry, I digress, but I wanted to share that. Okay, we're going to now look at, so now you have kind of a sense. Oh, I don't want you to be discouraged if you've been in therapy for a while and you find out, oh, I'm just in the early stage. You now can move things forward. Okay, so we're going to look at, see up top, early stage, goes to about the 40s. So I highlighted it a little bit in yellow. So what we're now going to do is we're going to focus on the early stage. So for those of you in therapy, you'll be able to kind of get a sense of where you are on the field. If already these make sense to you and you've already kind of passed this, then just take heart. You've moved it down the field. If you're just beginning to think in terms of therapy, here's what you're going to be working on. Here will be the natural stuff that you're going to be working with, uncovering and encountering in the early stage. There we go. And we've talked about, this is the same thing as the walls. So in the early stage, what are you going to be experiencing? Ambivalence, right? You're not sure, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. That's very normal. Okay. So by the way, if you have ambivalence, then you know it doesn't matter if you've been in therapy for 8 years, 10 years, 15 years. If you still have ambivalence, guess where you are? I don't want to discourage you, but I want to normalize it. Okay, that you could be in this stage, you could stretch out the early stage forever. Okay, so I want to help you move the ball down the field. Self-shaming. If you're still really self-shaming yourself, you may be in the early stage. Now, that's different than working with guilt, because if you and when you start to find out that you were made to participate in things, that's different than self-shaming. Self-shaming, as I'm using it here, really means I should be stronger than this, and here I'm having to do therapy. Okay. Self-blaming. You know what? If I wasn't so preoccupied, I need to get my act together. Yeah, that's, as we talked about before, if you're still there, you can have a sense of where you're at. Second guessing. Now that's going to have to do with both, why am I doing this? Is this the right thing? And when stuff starts to come up, and also the parts. Okay. Am I really hearing what I'm hearing? Partly, am I seeing what I'm seeing? But is this normal? Okay. Now, again, these are very normal things. But if you've been in therapy for over 3 years and you're still experiencing this, just know that I don't want you to get discouraged, but just know that this is kind of where you're at and you can still move the ball down the field. Okay. There's hope. Okay. And this is going to be a key thing. Now, not only is this sort of a long bullet point, but this is going to be kind of partway through the beginning and it will stretch on. So resisting acknowledging the parts, kind of like the question, not just when we finally are the parts there? Should I acknowledge it? And then part of that acknowledgement is, do they have names? I'm pretty convinced that almost all parts have names, but I don't want you to get hung up on that. Just again, the question is, are you getting to know them? And then as we looked at last time, self-sabotaging, that's where you will do something to stop the process, and therefore you'll never get beyond the 40. Okay. Early stages experience or early stage experiences. So what is a survivor typically going to experience in this early stage? So again, here's a little barometer of where you're at. If all these resonate with you, then, and you've resolved some of these, then you know that you're in the working stage. So the first is, here's what you're going to experience. So we say that, you know what, it's going to get worse before it gets better. But once you get it down on the other side of the field, it's going to get better. Okay, so there's going to be an uptick from when you started. Now think about it. You started on the 2 and you're marching from left to right. You're going to experience an uptick in internal dialogue. So you can imagine that starts to become disconcerting, right? It was a little bit before, but now it's starting to increase. Well, what happens from that? Right? Increasing emotional lability. Now, what is that? A fancy little psych term just meaning shifting of moods. You're changing now. You're switching. Why? Because all things being equal, you're trying to keep things together, but the parts are starting to become more active. So you're noticing it. You actually may not be noticing it. You're starting to notice, as we'll see in just a second, the dissociation is getting more, but you're hearing from other people that your moods are changing, kind of changing up on people. I recommend, of course, video record your sessions if at all possible. And that way you can go back and watch and you'll see the shifting of moods. It's very common for me to be able to interact with a lot of different parts during sessions. That's important for you to know. Why? Because the goal is, can you identify each of those parts? It's one thing for me to be able to identify them. I usually have a sense. I can certainly sense when that shift is taking place, whether or not I know which part, but it's not so much as important for me to know. The question is, do you know? That's part of the goal. You need to be able to get to a point where you're familiar with every part that is coming up. Increasingly intrusive flashes of scenes. So in your mind's eye, you're starting to see things, and it's usually not pleasant. Well, you can imagine. You started therapy probably for a number of reasons. We looked at some of those reasons. Go back a couple of episodes and you'll see what tends to bring somebody into session or start therapy. Now they start, and before you know it, now this could have already started, but what's going to happen is, remember the little ones, they're going to begin to release those memories. That will be experienced for you or by you as what? You're starting to see things on the inside, and these are not happy scenes typically. Increasingly vivid nightmares. Often there's an uptick, and that's why I say this gets worse before it gets better. Do I fault anybody for saying, oh, I'm not buying, I don't want to sign up for this? No, I don't fault anybody, but now the question is this: how's it going and how's it really going? The reason you're thinking about therapy is what? And so what you're bracing for, okay, there's something down there. Okay, it's starting to come up. So nightmares, and they're going to be vivid. Okay. Now, part of that also, and we'll tackle it, is are you making it up? Generally speaking, if you saw something or if you have an active imagination, it'll be like recalling something. But if this is like you're stepping into a horror movie, if you're stepping into a nightmare, big difference between a dream versus a nightmare versus a night terror kind of thing, qualitatively. And if it's just kind of a regular dream, or if you saw something, most survivors, by the way, aren't watching a lot of horror movies. But if you saw something, it just doesn't have quite the reactive or reactivity. As a matter of fact, a client and her husband watched a movie I suggested, a battlefield movie. As a matter of fact, let me mention the movie, a very powerful movie. Every survivor, I would recommend watch this, because this is sort of what you're going to be doing. It's a historical film called The Great Raid. The Great Raid, and it's the most successful raid in World War II history. During World War II, the Marines went in and rescued American POWs in the Philippines. True story. And that's really what you're going to be doing with your parts. The bad guys have these parts all locked up, and you're going to begin to set the captives free. Her husband served in the military in special ops, and they watched over Memorial Day. And it was impactful for him. It helps process things. So, but big difference. Like if I'm watching it, it's a powerful movie. It's one of my favorite movies. But if I was sitting next to her husband, who is a war hero, he doesn't believe he is, because true heroes don't believe they are. They believe they were just doing what they were called to do. But let's say he and I are watching this film together. Both of us will have adrenaline going, but do you think both of us have adrenaline going for the same reason? No. There's a qualitative difference. So that would be also the difference between an active imagination versus recalling or reliving. And I mentioned I have on my site an interview with Bert about repressed memories. So he came up with a dream. He's a war vet, but he remembered something at age 11. I recommend going back. You can go and watch that. Body memories. Here's something that a lot of survivors either have experienced and didn't connect it, or have never experienced it and now will start to. The Body Keeps the Score. Good book by Bessel van der Kolk. He started working with Vietnam vets, but it's now become such a useful phrase because the body will hold on to the trauma, meaning the mind will. What'll happen is this: as you are starting to move in toward truth, it's going to take the little bulldozer is going to be scraping layers off, right? Layers of sediment, and that volleyball of truth, the pressure, the intensity, the truth is trying to come to the surface. So the more layers you scrape off, we will start to have, it will get dislodged. It's starting to come to the surface. It's coming up with power. By the way, as it comes up, you will probably find yourself becoming compulsive. That word compulsion means with power. Something is acting on you with power. What? Truth is coming up, and a part of you is going to try to keep it down. And so the greater pain wins out. So you'll find you will become compulsive in some fashion. It's normal, but just be mindful of that, right? As it's coming up, if you try to sit in stillness, and that's part of the challenge of meditation. I recommend Middle Eastern meditation rather than, it's going to sound funny, rather than Eastern meditation. I'll tell you why. Now, meditation to do stretching, like yoga, so we'll do that. Yoga is good. I've recently been watching yoga people stretching because I'm trying to, okay. The yoga moves are excellent because we need to keep our bodies healthy. But as you become still, whatever's under the surface becomes loud. It's going to start to come to the surface. So just be prepared for, as you start to become still, you won't be able to think about nothing. Okay. It's just the way it is. Now, you want to become mindful of what your body is doing because the trauma can be locked in certain areas of the body. Muscle groups will be tight. Okay. But in a way, what you want to do is you want stuff to come to the surface, and that's why you want to do Middle Eastern meditation. Eastern meditation tells you to empty your thoughts and really think of nothing and just be in the now. Well, it's my bias. You just can't think of nothing. We were never intended to think of nothing. Okay. We're intended to fill our minds with something. Now, I'm coming from a kind of a Judeo-Christian perspective, which is fill your mind. Think on these things. Think on what? Think on truth. Now that is going to be helpful. Why? Because our brain is always thinking about something. PTSD, you're on overdrive, you're hypervigilant. Why? Because you're subconscious on some level, part of you is thinking of something. So it's a battle for truth. Because the part of you knows what it knows, but the question is it still relevant? Is it still true? Okay, so what's going to happen is you want the stuff to come up, but you want to do it in a paced manner. That's why it's important to do exercise, do venting. We've talked about that. But what will happen is this: as you start to get closer to truth and the little parts down the bottom start to release those memories, start to bypass the gatekeepers, which are the firefighters, and they start to come up, you're going to find that the memories will start to come to mind either in flashes or in nightmares. Something also will happen, oftentimes at the same time, or it can be separate, is you will start to experience certain pains in your body. We're going to describe additional things, but you're going to start to experience things that are inexplicable, but they will be reoccurring. Now, there's two kinds of things that you will experience as far as pains. So let me differentiate these. One is this is very common. As you're starting to wrestle with the idea of whether or not you have parts, oftentimes what will happen is this: you will start to feel, that's where movement or discomfort or sensation or even pain in different parts of your cranium. And it will start to move around. Okay. All things being, now you always want to, I recommend this, if you haven't had a good physical, go get a physical. Because what we don't want to do is attribute something physical and therefore be overlooking something, because somebody could even have a brain tumor. I don't want to freak anybody out, but right. So if you're having pain in your head, don't ignore that, because we could be talking psychology in counseling all the day long, when in fact you simply just have something physical. So if in doubt, rule it out. What do you say? So make sure you go get your blood work. If your endocrine system is all whacked out, right, there are certain parts that will cause you to get tired, but if you have adrenal failure, then you will get tired. So let's rule physical things out. Go get blood work, get a good physical done. It's probably been a while since you've done that. Probably you've avoided it. Why? Understandably. Okay, so let's say everything checks out and you're fine. So if you start to feel sensation in your cranium that's moving around your scalp, and meaning like just under the hairline, right, or pain that moves and it starts in different places, it may very well be parts that are getting your attention. And be mindful of that. Pay attention. Dialectical behavioral therapy, DBT, which is recommended for what, borderline personality disorder. Frank Anderson of IFS talks about he's never seen a case of borderline personality disorder that really didn't have to do with parts. So DBT, dialectical behavioral therapy, part of what it recommends or implements is mindfulness. Now, what is mindfulness? I'm just becoming aware of not just how I'm coming across, but what's going on for me. So I'm starting to tune into my body. And that's crucial. That's important. Why? Because the parts will begin to communicate with you so that you can get a sense of what's going on. So that's one form of discomfort. That's one sort of, sometimes it'll be pain. You may actually be remembering what was done to you in some parts. There's one client I work with, actually it's not uncommon, but one in particular has a part that was there to take some of the pain, and one of the perpetrators used a taser, a handheld taser. Some people have experienced cattle prods, okay, but a handheld taser on her arm, some right in the back of the ear, okay. Um, so, as a matter of fact, this client has a scar that's really only explained by this. Well, it's very interesting to think that as we're getting close to some of the more profound memories, this one part is doing what now? Because after this part really did try to get help. So the perps were harming the kids. This was in a daycare, and this child climbed up and pulled the fire alarm, which is actually a very brave thing to do. What happened? Fire department came, and of course, the firemen come in and they're looking around. And what position did that? It was in daycare. What position did that put the daycare staff? This was a 24/7 daycare. So now the perps have to pretend like everything's fine, but they have all these traumatized kids. So the fire department leaves and blames it on the kid. What do you think happened to that kid, my client? What do you think happened after the fire department left? It really hasn't been disclosed, but I can only imagine. But one of the things they did to teach that kid a lesson, to make sure they kept silent, kept submissive, obeyed, maintained their place, is what? They took a taser and they zapped this kid. So that little part now knows, because the perps, and remember, parts are stuck in time. That's why it feels like it's still happening. That's why they're so vigilant. They are not connected to the present. That'll be part of the work in the working stage to help them come out of their time capsule, so to speak. So this little part was threatened that if he ever does again, and it's a female client, but male little part, that if any secrets are ever disclosed, if anybody ever talks, that they're going to hurt one of the little ones, if not the core. So that part does what when, quote unquote, secrets are starting to come up. So the client, in talking with me, what do you think will happen when certain kinds of memories are starting to come up? She'll feel what? Yeah, whether she moves or not, she feels the pain. So she'll feel shocks. Well, the body keeps a score. So that would be a different kind of body memory. So it's different than the parts that are letting you know through usually sensation on your cranium, very consistent. So those would be parts getting your attention. Body memories are pains that are either being replicated, so pain being replicated by parts, what was done to parts to keep the upper parts and to keep you quiet. So you'll be remembering what they did, kind of threats, or it will be things that happened a lot. One thing that is pretty common is where syringes went in. I have one client who was told when they were young, or they're injecting this kid, but when the mother picked them up, or when other adults would look, so the perps called them mosquito bites. Pretty brilliant on the part of a perp, because what is a shot, an injection, hypodermic needle? When it goes into the skin and then pulled out, what mark does it leave? Well, if you injected kids with narcotics or some kind of drugs before you abuse them, now they're going to have what? They're going to have marks, right? And think about how sensitive kids' skin is. So if somebody else noticed, like, oh, you went to the doctor, you got a bunch of shots, right? Did you get shots, right? If the perps want to get busted, they're not going to say anything, but what they do is they call it different. Oh, mosquito bites. And so then somebody will look at that and say, oh, mosquito bite. Because also what happens, depending upon what you put in the kid, the site itself will become itchy and red and irritated. And they'll put a little Band-Aid over it, the perps will, when it first happened. Well, fast forward 20 years later, 25, 40 years later, what do you think will come up on the skin? All of a sudden, we've got mosquito bites. We've got these injection sites that will come up. Well, that will precede the memory. So with body memories, you're going to start, the survivor will start to have inexplicable either marks or just pains deep in certain body areas, including in their uterus, in their vagina, in their anus, different parts of their body. Or you're going to see marks appear. You'll see welts appear spontaneously. You'll see bruises. You'll see water blisters appear. Inevitably, what that means is this. So the more profound it's happening, and oftentimes you're going to start to experience the memories or flashes of things, nightmares, and the body memories are going to start to coalesce. They're going to start to become more and more profound because something's trying to come up. And by the time it comes up in a body memory, it's pretty much assured, especially if it's a welt or if it's appearing on the skin. The memory is just behind it. So for instance, I know if a client tells me they have some welts or mosquito bites or many little areas, and it can be between the toes, between the fingers, just different parts, or also hands going numb, ankles going numb. I'll tell you, oftentimes, inevitably, I mean, there's a couple different reasons, but almost inevitably, that's because they were stretched in some fashion. They had the wrist braces that have padding. Think about in, let's say, it's horrible, right? They used to be like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, or where they hook them up and they're shocking them or they're raping them. And so if a kid's going through horrible things, what is a kid? So let's say a kid is spread eagle, but they're strapped and they're naked and they're tied, they're secured by their wrists and by their ankles, and you're harming that kid. What's a kid going to do? Going to pull both directions, feet and wrists. What do you think that does to the wrists? What do you think that does to the bones? Okay. Oftentimes what you'll find is, and both, okay, you'll find that chiropractors or other doctors have told these people, because maybe they've brought it up, they'll ask, like the medical personnel, the chiropractors will ask, what happened to your wrists? I have one client who just massively, her wrists and ankles are destroyed. Also, what happens? Numbness, tingling. And so they have this one particular client has just chalked it off to carpal tunnel syndrome, or when she drives, it must be the way she holds the steering wheel, but it's just on long distance as well. Well, you're not doing much with your wrist. So if your wrists and ankles go numb, this is where journaling is super important, because trust me, if you're starting to experience these things, parts are releasing this. And there's going to be memories just behind it. And that's why you have to be doing journaling and drawing. Let the parts show you what happened. And then you have to go back and look at it and then take the next step. Show your coach, show your therapist, because it becomes all the more real. It lets it sink in. Also, if a kid is restrained, is strapped, as they're pulling on their wrists, there's going to be other, think about the strain on the elbows, on the shoulders, and during an event like that, a horrible raping, other parts are going to be, they're going to have pain, right? One other thing I've seen a number of times or heard is that some of the perps will put a hole in the bottom of the foot. They're going to do something. Oftentimes they will put something in that hole. I don't want to get more graphic, but there's things. So if you ever notice that, wait a second, I have a scar in the bottom of my foot, it's like, or I remember it was like it was an open wound. It was never, I always remember it's supposed to keep it clean. Okay, that's an important thing to remember. Let's find out what other kind of things. There it is, right? Unpleasant taste in your mouth. I'm discovering more and more this is almost a universal thing. Now, you may have written this off as just something or nothing, but do you ever find that you always have to have flavored water? You always have to have fruit juice. It's just not straight up water. Now, another thing, by the way, do you ever notice that in the past that you've resisted drinking water? That's a telltale sign. Why? Because if you don't drink water, you don't have to urinate. You don't have to go to the bathroom. What is it about going to the bathroom that causes panic attacks, that causes pain, that causes that you avoid? Okay. So there's an ultimate dilemma with a lot of survivors because things happened to them in the bathrooms, or it's a reminder of things. But the unpleasant taste, guess what that might be about? If you were orally raped or if you were made to drink blood. No wonder. And so the body keeps the score. And so if you find yourself, now, can you imagine if a kid went through that? What is a normal response to that? You're going to want to vomit. So if you find that you have dry heaves throughout the day, if you start to feel like you're going to throw up for no reason, if you find that maybe it's not coming up like dry heaves, but little burps or something, but with some sort of taste, and you never thought about it, but you're always drinking not to keep your body quenched, but to get rid of this taste. Ask yourself this: what does it taste like? What taste is in your mouth? I don't say that gratuitously. It's important to know that it's probably not your imagination. As a matter of fact, let me ask this, because some parts of you will say, well, I don't know what it tastes like. It's just, I don't like it. Okay, let me ask a question here. Have you ever picked your cuticles, okay, to where there's been some blood, or you have a little drop of blood? What's a normal thing to do? Or you get your finger pricked or something like that. Most people, what you'll find is this: they do what, or they cut themselves. Most people inadvertently are just, right, they're going to do what? Right, starting to bleed. So let's say you nick your finger or something, you're working with a box cutter or something, and you nick. So automatically, what do most people do? Right, they're going to go hand to mouth. And the question is this: have you ever tasted that before? And is it any different than the taste that's always in your mouth? Okay. Spontaneous gag reflex, that speaks to the same thing. Okay. There's something going on that's causing this gag reflex, especially if you see something or hear something or smell something, one of the five senses. Okay. Again, this is in the early stage. What you can plan on, probably if you went through a whole lot of stuff, then inevitably you're going to experience these things. Feeling nauseous, same thing. there's going to be an increase in self-injurious behaviors. Why? Because as the stuff starts to come up, what's going to start to come up? The tension, right? Ultimately, think in terms of this. The flip side of hurt is anger. So under the tension is actually anger. Anger is neither good or bad. It depends upon what you do with it, but you have righteous indignation. So you have, on a scale of 1 to 10, you have 10 level anger, you have rage. Psalm 37 speaks to there's no problem being angry, right? It's what we do with it. And you need to be angry. You need to allow yourself to. We've talked about venting. You want to be able to do that. That is the key to your healing. If you don't have access to your anger, you'll never heal. Okay? So self-injurious behaviors, it runs the gamut. It's anything you do that hurts you, right? And you know what that is, right? They can anything from the more profound, the more you will draw blood. Let's just put it that way, right? What can you do? You can bite your tongue, bite your inside of your cheeks. You can everything from cuticles to toes to you're slicing places where people won't see, or slicing your forearms. You can burn yourself. You can smash your hand. You can take a hammer to yourself. You can do all sorts of things. It's a wide variety of things, but anytime you're hurting yourself. And here's an important thing. It doesn't matter if you feel it at the time or not. Okay? You just have to be able to be honest. If you see an uptick in self-injurious behaviors, I don't want you to feel like therapy is causing you to get worse. You can imagine, right? And if you think that, you're normal. Why? Because when you started therapy, you weren't like this. Okay. Now, being able to vent will decrease that. And that's the only way, really, it's going to decrease it. So you have to be able to vent. Again, go back and look at previous episodes. What are you going to experience? Increasing internal dialogue and crosstalk. Where's that coming from? Not your imagination, it's the parts. So whatever you were experiencing before, down on the 2-yard line as you started therapy, what's going to happen as you progress? What's happening? Because you're inviting them. Whether you know it or not, you're inviting them because you actually said you want to know what happened, right? That's what you tell the therapist. That's what you've told yourself. And so guess who holds your memories? And they're taking you up on your offer. And they want you to be healed. They want to unburden themselves, but they know things are chaotic, and that's why you're thinking about therapy. Okay? And here you go. That's supposed to be increasing gaps of unconscious awareness, even if you are co-conscious, even if you already know your parts, even if you've been having that internal dialogue for years, what you're going to start to find, and it's actually a good thing, is you're going to start to notice, and it's going to feel like you're going to be going backwards, but it's not. What it means is you're starting to let go of control. Now, that's different than getting out of control. That's different than being controlled. Okay. As a matter of fact, during this time, right, a reasonable thing to ask is, wait a second, because I'm now starting to notice that I'm unaware, but you'll also probably notice in thinking back in your childhood, you probably don't remember everything. But sort of in the here and now, you've been co-conscious up to that point. And now you're starting to have gaps that would feel like, wait a second, I'm backtracking. This has never happened to me. I'm starting to get worse. Ready? You're not getting worse. And one of the fears, one of the concerns is this, wait a second. Now I'm probably going to start doing what I've seen or heard. I'm going to drive a car 3,000 miles and wake up, and I won't know what the heck I am, where I am. I won't know what I've been doing. I'm going to be racking up shopping bills. I might even go have affairs with people I don't know. I won't even recognize myself. Okay. You do run the risk of that if, now here's the condition. If you ignore the parts, the way you decrease the likelihood. Now think about when a lot of people start coming into therapy, they're probably experiencing that, and that's why they come into therapy. Life's becoming unmanageable, and things like that are happening. Well, the reason it's happening is you are disconnected from your parts. Your parts are there to protect you. Now, there's some parts that don't feel keen about you right now. That's a different issue. But the more you get to know your parts and the more you begin to honor them, the more you begin to let them know you want to hear from them and have direct dialogue, then the less they have to do roundabout measures or kind of like, pull you in and get you out of the way, because they're going to let you know one way or the other, and they're tired of being ignored. That's when, right, you wind up kind of doing stuff that is going to be not the best. So the way to decrease the unconscious, quote unquote, acting out, for lack of a better term, the way to decrease the amnestic fugue, where you drive somewhere before you know it, or you've done something, you're doing things, the way to decrease that is increase the dialogue. Get the free flow of information, get the free flow of communication, get that going. And with that, information will be shared. And then you can begin to work as a team. So when you end up as the quarterback, remember, using this football analogy, you increase the likelihood of you're going to be doing things that you regret in order to bring down the intensity. So compulsively doing stuff is the way to increase the likelihood of that is to say, this isn't happening to me and I'm off the football field. Well, too bad you started it. So stay on the field. Okay. There we go. You'll experience an increasing sense of historical dissociation. This is when you start to become more aware of how much of you and your past and your childhood you don't remember. So at first you go, no, I got pretty good recall. And then little by little, there's probably a couple of reasons for that. One, you may actually be starting to talk to people you know, or talk to family members that are safe. And in these conversations, because it may be over the course of time, just conversations are coming up, whether inadvertent, such as, oh, remember when we, and you go, what? Right? Or you are starting to ask, or you see photographs. Well, now you're a little more mindful and you start to become aware of, in a way, what was already available to you, which was a lack of availability in this sense, right? You had your pictures, you had sources of corroboration, you just never went there, but now you're going there and now you're finding out that you really don't have recollection. So you're becoming more aware of how much really in your life you don't remember. Increasing desire to put all of this away, put it back in a box. Okay, so it's very normal to experience during, see, from the 2-yard line all the way to the 40, right? The further you go, it's like, whoa, you know what? No, let's just go for regular kind of cognitive behavioral. You know what? Behavioral therapy, just help me, help me with some quick answers to this. Right? I don't like what's coming up. I don't want to see this. And we want to put it in a box. Let's put it all back together. That's very common. But you can imagine if somebody does, then what? They're going to stop therapy. In a way, that's what Sybil did. So if anybody like the false memory, fraudulent folks, or if Soylent Green of the non-satanic satanic temple, I heard his name was Brian, I think, right? But if Lucius wants to come on, we want to talk about that. They'll inevitably bring up about Sybil. My contention is this: Sybil was probably down on about the 35 or the 40, though she had gotten far. But when you get to this point, this is where you have people say, yeah, you know what? Nothing happened. I made it all up. It was a lie. And you'll apologize to the therapist for taking his or her time up. And basically you're just backtracking, okay? And you're walking off the field. So it's normal, but you won't get any further, and it'll get worse for you, okay? Because why? Because it's better to not start the process. But if you start the process, you can do it, because you will have help both from God and from the inside, okay? Again, here are some of the experiences. Increased internal debate. Why this whole thing is crazy. Okay, so you'll not only be telling yourself this is crazy, but you're going to have parts that are going to say this is crazy. Why would some parts say this is crazy? because they have a sense and they don't want to go there, or they are defending and they're trying to get you to stop. So they're telling you as kind of a way of shutting it down, right? Maybe, some will get all over you, some will get all over your case, some will have a sense of foreboding, some will tell you there's going to be doom, there's going to be bad things that are going to happen, sense of foreboding. But others will say, you know what, you are crazy. Nobody goes through this, and look at this crazy talk, and you're just crazy. Okay. So who wants to be crazy? So they could use that angle, as it were, to cause you to back off and cause you to shut down. And trust me, you're not crazy. Okay. And we'll go into that because that'll be part of what you'll need to know. How do you know if you're crazy or not? I'll tell you a quick way to find out. Crazy people, we've talked about this in the past, but I'll allay any concerns right now, but we'll still talk more about it. How do you know if you're crazy? Well, if you're wondering, then you're not crazy. Okay. Because crazy people never wonder if they're crazy, and they think you're crazy for not believing them. And that's why they'll tell you gladly about the voices, and they are hearing voices from the outside in, and they want to protect you from the Norwegian antenna that's broadcasting to you. And that's why they wear a tinfoil hat, and they're offering to make you a tinfoil hat. Okay. And crazy people are always consistent, but they don't fear. Number one, they don't fear being crazy. Crazy people don't believe they're crazy. So if you fear that you're going to be crazy, or if you think it's crazy, then you're not crazy. Okay. And crazy people are very consistent, by the way. They don't change up. Okay. Increasing sense of doom. This will come from parts that are trying to shut things down. Why? Because of fear, because they've been told certain things and they've seen certain things, and they're stuck in time. And so what do they believe? You keep going, and they have very good reasons for why they have us believe that bad things will happen. So just know it's very normal. As you get further along into this, you're going to have an increasing sense of that something bad is going to happen. Stay the course, though. Okay. What else? Increased second guessing, right? Well, it's a very normal thing. If you start to feel like you're increasingly crazy and you have a sense of doom, and look at all this stuff, right? What's a very normal response? It's like, I don't know if this is what I signed up for. I don't know if okay. The problem is you're normal, number one. Okay. If somebody doesn't have second thoughts, I would almost worry about them. So if you have second thoughts, you're normal. That means your parts are normal, by the way. But the one thing you don't want to do is stop. Why? Because you try to put it back in the box right now, what's going to happen? You've come too far. You've kind of opened the box. You can't try to put it back in the box. You're going to become compulsive in some fashion. You'll be compulsively in denial. Maybe you'll think happy thoughts for a while, but guess what? It's only a matter of time till something comes back. I'll tell you, right? If nothing else, what about the calendar date? If nothing else, tell you what, your mother-in-law will come along. Her birthday, somebody's going to come along and trigger you, or something's going to come along. What about May Day? What about Easter? What about Christmas? What about the holidays? It'll get worse this time because you have an increasing sense. Okay. So second guessing is normal. I recommend stay on the field, continue moving through it, because it's going to get worse before it gets better, but it'll get better because you're going to move down the field. Okay. It's like going down into the Grand Canyon, one foot in front of the other, keep the pace. You're going into the valley of the shadow of death, into the dark night of the soul. But what'll happen? You will start coming out. You will. Increasing inadvertent use of plurality. Okay. What does that mean? You're going to find yourself without knowing it. And that's why I recommend journaling and recording yourself. Before you know it, every now and then you're going to talk about we, or you're going to talk about you in the third person, he or she, and you won't even know that's happening. So if you can go back and watch it, if you can see that in journaling, then the question is, who is we? Okay, you're not crazy. But what it means is, and it's actually a good sign, a part of you is getting more used to, becoming more comfortable with the idea of multiplicity. And presuppose you're doing journaling, right? You're not going to progress if you don't do journaling. I hate to tell you, it's just, I have not seen an exception because you have to get that dialogue going. Plus, of course, you're going to bring your journal to session. That's going to give you and your therapist the material to work with, right? So you want to be doing journaling. If you don't journal, you're just, you're not going to be making progress. So as you're getting in the flow state, the parts are going to start to come out and you're going to see a shift in handwriting. That's a good sign. That means you're becoming more comfortable, and each part will have a different style of handwriting and it will be very consistent. That's why you want to get them ultimately to let you want to get their name. You want to allow them, if you want it, they will. But if you build it, they will come. Meaning, if you really want to know, they'll let you know who they are. And that way you'll be able to sense who each part is, who you're talking to. And those different styles of handwriting will match the sensation on your cranium. You need, why do you need to know this? Because you need to know. You need to know who you're talking to, because each have a part, right? They each have a part, a role, not to play. They are fulfilling, they're serving a very unique part, and they have perspective and they have a vantage point. You know, they have a perspective and they're there for a reason. And so if one of them is trying to tell you something, then you need to identify, you need to connect with them. So the more you can identify what that part of you is saying, and the faster and the smoother you can do that, the more seamlessly you can do that, the better off you will be, the less internal struggle, and the more you will be able to make yardage moving down the field. Okay, what I want to show you is this. Let me go back just for a second. Okay, we're now going to shift. I've listed off a number of quote unquote indicators. I want to show you where you can have a much more extensive list, and it's on survivorsupport.net. And this is the picture you're going to see. Okay, and I've written down the biggest challenge for the survivor of ritualistic sexual abuse is that they have experienced a profound shattering of their inner world. I'm going to show you where you can find this list. Okay, we're going to get out, and now I'm going to take you to the website. So this is the website. Emma is always kind enough to show this at the end, but I'll give a real quick primer, so to speak. Here's my Friday night program. If you want to watch live, we covered counseling topics. We're dealing with forgiveness, what it is and what it is not, by the way. You can click on that live. Here's a little promo for that. If anybody wants to donate, or yeah, if you want to donate, or if you want to schedule a session, by the way, you click here on this picture. As a matter of fact, I'll show you what happens, right? So this will bring you to, that's an actual quote. And then that'll say if you want to do a video call, and then what you'll do is you do PayPal. But by the way, I do have terms and conditions. What are those terms and conditions? Essentially this, I won't be working with you at using my therapy license. The reason why is I don't have to diagnose you. Okay, and that means I can work with people outside of Pennsylvania and South Carolina. So when I work with folks, I work with them as a personal consultant. But what does that mean? It means you get all of me, all my skills and abilities, but I'm not having to do a treatment plan. I'm not having to diagnose you. I don't have to take case notes. And you don't have to worry about if anything were to ever go to court, right? Because it's not the same kind of relationship. And the notes they would get, they would never derive any benefit. And the majority of the time, I have a very good memory. Okay, so if you ever want to reach out to me and do a consult or regular consulting, that's how you do that, by the way. Let's go back to the home. Okay, how you find that list is you go to Journey to Healing. No, I'm sorry, home. And no, how well do I know my own site? Okay, second tab, Journey to Healing. That's the same title as my program. We're going to go to Profile of Profound Abuse. You click on that, and there you go. I give a brief kind of descriptor of trauma and the effects. We're going to scroll down, watch your eyes there, and we're going to get to, there you go. I give a brief personality profile. I probably need to reshape all this because a personality profile is different than unexplained illnesses. So the first right there, high IQ, that's almost inevitably the case. But go down through these bullet point lists. So what I gave you just a few minutes ago was just a brief primer, as it were. Look at they have a lot of forgetfulness. Look at how many bullet points. Here's noises, experience unusual degree of discomfort, thought of going to church. So there's a lot. So I just want you to take time to go through all this. If you start to find, so this is even more than the dissociative experiences scale. I have that, by the way, under the second tab here, help for the journey, fourth tab down, impact of trauma, dissociative experiences scale. Okay, but this is a good checklist. I created this just from my clinical experience. Okay, so go through this. If you start to find that, oh gosh, I've got a lot of these, then just know it's more than your imagination. Okay, so that continues that list. So there's that bullet point list to help you really discern whether or not this is, quote unquote, just your imagination. Okay, we're going to continue now with the PowerPoint presentation. And we'll start to bring this in a little bit into a landing. Okay, what do we have next? Okay, we're now going to focus again. So we were looking at what happens in that beginning stages. What are the things you can experience now? So you see, we're just focusing on kind of the 2-yard line to the 40, give or take in there. Okay, what are some of the questions that you're going to have that you as a client, or if I'm speaking to you, if you're a fellow therapist, just know whether these questions actually are ever verbalized or not. These are questions that are there and they're going to need to be attended to. So these questions will let you know where about in therapy you are. Okay, so these are normal. Okay. Oh, they're slanted. I try to kind of keep the same 3-dimensional angle. Okay, what is going on with me? Okay, you can imagine, right? Because as you start therapy, you're wondering what the heck's going on with me. I'm losing it. I'm not able to keep things together. So what's happening? But what is going on with me? And then if it gets worse before it gets better, right? You can imagine during this whole time, from the two stepping onto the field, right? That question is there, and then it's going to be kind of ongoing. But if that question, what is going on with me? If that's kind of present for you, you're in the beginning stage. Okay, but it's going to get better. Okay, that question, by the time you get into the working stage, these questions should eventually kind of subside because now the questions have been answered. So what's going on with you? What I would say is this, stuff's coming up. It's getting worse. Parts of you are trying to get your attention. It's a convergence of things, probably a number of reasons, but the way things were being held together isn't really working, or it's finally time. Maybe you finally have time to decompress and now the stuff is coming up. So for instance, that's what how I would respond if a client was asking that. Okay, what's happening to me? You can see kind of variations, very similar. Well, what's happening? And again, that question will kind of exist anywhere along that continuum, but to move into the second state, that middle stage, these pretty much have to be answered. So just off the top of my head, if the client asks right when they're coming in, what's happening? I would actually also ask them, they'd say, what's happening to me? I'd say, well, can you explain that? Well, I'm just starting, maybe they describe having panic attacks, right? We could explore that. But certainly what's happening is this, what used to be isn't what is now. What used to be able to be contained isn't. What you used to be able to handle, you're not handling very well. What used to be, you were capable, competent, you were affable, you were the life of the party, you had a lot of friends, but now all of a sudden you're becoming introverted. You are just becoming depressed, you're becoming anxious, right? A lot of mental health, supposed mental health things. Things are changing. So what's happening? Something's going on. What's happening? Something's coming up. Okay. What am I dealing with? Right? These are all very normal questions, Again, these will be questions at the outset and throughout this beginning stage. So just know, if you haven't been able to help these questions be resolved, for you yourself, if you're the client, you're still in the beginning stages. If you're a therapist, just know, if your client is still asking these questions, they haven't moved into that real primary working stage. Okay, what am I dealing with? Yeah, so the client is asking, what am I dealing with? What are they probably asking you? They're fearful, right? They're wondering because it's probably getting worse. They also don't know if there's a physical thing, because what happens if they're having body memories? They may be having panic attacks. They feel, how about this? I feel like I'm losing my mind, right? Because now do I have Alzheimer's? I'm forgetting things, right? Think about all the indicators of parts. How about they're starting to have flashbacks, or they're hearing voices, right? That there's the parts. They think they're crazy. They may start to become ever more crazy. How about this? They just have a massive compulsive desire to go down the rabbit hole. They're starting to just be compulsive about reading about child trafficking or all this satanic ritual abuse stuff, and they can't stop. And what's happening to me, right? So it's a sense of, I don't know what's happening, but under the surface, there's something coming up that's driving me. So they want to know, what are they dealing with? It feels bigger than them. Also, if somebody, quote unquote, cursed them. Now, if you've been with us before, been with me before, you're going to know that I don't believe in curses, but a lot of that stuff goes on. So they have to, and if that just triggered you, you know what, go back and watch this or sign up with me and we can talk about it. Okay. But it's really important. So you just have to kind of accept that statement for now. Okay. There's it. You can see these are all variations of similar, kind of the similar thing. It's overwhelming. What used to be isn't any longer. What used to be happening, what used to be normal. I can't cope. I can't do it. I can't keep it together. What is wrong with me? And oftentimes it's going to be when things are getting more calm. How about when the kids finally leave home? When it's less intense, because you're a PTSD survivor, what happens? Right? When it gets calm, then your PTSD kicks in. And you look around you and everybody else is doing okay. And it seems like they're moving forward and you're starting to regress. There's the, right? What's wrong with me? So you can see, right? What's going on with me? What's happening? Why am I dealing with this? What am I dealing with? Why is it, what's wrong with me? That's really a summary kind of question. Okay. Why? Because I can't cope like I used to. Even the basic things seem overwhelming. You can't even drive without your GPS. You're losing track of things, and not just things, but time and projects. And now people are beginning to wonder, and you're having to walk out of church. You're finding panic attacks. You can't take communion anymore. You find yourself with not just panic attacks, but agoraphobia. Your life is becoming smaller. You're losing your joy. You're losing your sense of confidence. You're hearing these voices, right? Okay, here it is, right? Only crazy people hear voices, right? I don't know, it used to be negative self-talk, but now ever since listening to you and these stupid things that you're putting out, John, I feel like these, okay, right? Yeah, it's all of a sudden becoming much more pronounced. No, crazy is not crazy. Yeah, crazy people hear voices, but from the outside in. And do the crazy people worry about it? You know, they don't like some of what's going on with some of the voices, but are they afraid to tell you about the voices? No. The fact that you feel crazy hearing the voices and you don't want to tell people means you're not crazy. That's in brief. Okay. Wouldn't I remember if some kind of trauma happened? Very normal response, especially if you've been listening to the series, right? Because why are you starting to ask that question? Because now you're starting to realize how much you don't know. Okay, now it's like, well, okay, maybe I don't know, but wouldn't I remember about what caused me not to remember? No, right now at the outset, that's why you blocked it out. Now, does that mean if you have a gap, I want you all of a sudden to conclude the worst? No, we're not going there yet. But you have to be open to what? Whatever might come up. That's key. Now, we're going to solve the false memory perps and false memory foundation fraudulent folks, okay? Now, when I say false memory perps, what I mean is that those that are pushing false memory foundation talking points to say, well, if anything traumatic happened, you'd remember it. Really? Oh, as an adult, we call that amnesia. So don't tell me about the child with a developing brain, the child amnesia. That's what we'll call it. But now these memories come back. It's very normal. Okay. But I'm really emphatic almost now. Okay, good people differ, but I'm just going to say how I approach therapy. And I've mentioned this before. Good people different, good therapists different about hypnosis and EMDR. Colin Ross uses hypnosis. I just don't do any of it. I don't believe in it. The more I'm doing this, the longer I've been at this, and the more severe the cases of folks that I'm working with, I'm just now all the more settled that you don't need to. Okay, so for those of you that want to peddle this notion, those of you naysayers that are tuning in, that are mocking survivors or want to try to say, oh, satanic panic. Okay, ready? I don't do anything that's going to bring memories up. So don't sit there and run your mouth, you naysayers or you Soylent Green type, right? And want to try to mock survivors. I do regular therapy. What is that? I'm listening. And whatever's going to come up is going to come up. And if you don't like the fact that a survivor may start to remember pretty heinous stuff, and would adults ever do heinous stuff? Well, go back and watch the series we did on how do you make a sexual psychopath. I used to work in prison with people that did really heinous things, the kinds that we're talking about, but they don't call it SRA. What do they call it? They call it 50 to 100 years in prison. They call it multiple counts of rape. That use items. They call it ritualistic abuse. Okay, so those of you that are trying to be naysayers, go peddle your papers. Okay, so the reality is this. If you stay in there, if you're a therapist and you stay in there long enough and just do normal therapy with a survivor, guess what? If something's going to come up, it's going to come up. If you're observant, you can simply ask questions. So don't ask leading questions, by the way. Stay far away. This is my approach. I stay far away, even if I pretty much concluded what happened, even if I kind of know that mom did it or mom was a co-facilitator. I worked with somebody last night. I know all I need to know, how involved mom was. But it was being reported. She was going through a body memory, going through an actual memory. I'm taking notes as far as I'm quoting, okay, because that's important, because I want to be able to, when a client is ready, to hear. But this is because this client isn't recording their video recording. But even when they do, sometimes they won't want to go back and watch. So I'm transcribing. Okay, I'm quoting them. Sometimes I get writer's cramp because I'm quoting fast. Okay, so I can have to be able to repeat back to them if and when they want to know. Okay, so a part is coming up last night. A part disclosed about mom and how involved mom was. So no doubt mom did it. Well, right now it's not going to do me any good to say, hey, you know what? Your mom did it. Your mom was involved. Why are you worried about honoring her? Why is Mother's Day still triggering you? Why do you feel guilty? Why are you still talking to her? She's a perpetrator. She facilitated this. She knew what they were doing and arranged it and made phone calls to get people there. It's too much. That's why she wasn't the one telling me. It was another part. So I'm simply going to allow the client to become more comfortable in the therapeutic relationship. And because she's doing journaling, because she's doing some of the other things, because she's doing venting, the parts are releasing this and they will start to come up in session. I don't have to lead, like, who is coming? She's remembering and, oh, somebody's coming in the room. Was it your mother? Okay. And same thing with a kid, right? You never want to ask leading questions. That's what happened in the Martin case. The therapist, unfortunately, I believe those kids were perked on. Of course I do. Gunderson was part of the FBI. And he went back and found the tunnels. Okay, there are tons of tunnels all over the place. Okay. But if you're a therapist working with kids, you don't want to give the answer. let it come up. Okay, you can postulate, and again, an effective child therapist is really good at it, and they'll do a lot of drawings. Okay, but still working with parts, even though, okay, I know because they're in the bedroom and I know what time of night, and I kind of know that this is dad, come in her bedroom. I'm not going to say, when she said, I can't see his face, I'm going to say, well, do you see your dad? Okay, I don't want to do that. Why? Because if she can't see the face, first of all, she may see the hands, she may see the shoes, and then it'll come. She can't see the face. There's a reason why. Okay, some MK Ultra, they work real hard, these perps, to make sure the person can't see the face. In time, if they need to see the face, they'll see it. The most important thing is that they know that something happened. Okay, so stay away from ever leading or guiding. You don't need to do that. Let them keep their own pace. When a memory is coming up, oftentimes it's going to have, that's when the body memory and the memory comes together, and they will be re-experiencing the rape. It's very, very hard as a therapist to watch someone, as it were, be re-assaulted, to be re-raped. But that's, as a therapist, you have to be prepared. It's horrible, horrible to watch. But that's why this is not therapy that everybody should be doing. And then we have to take care of ourselves as therapists because we have rage, we have vicarious trauma. Okay. But you don't want to lead and you don't want to suggest, you just want to ask questions. By the way, for a therapist, what I ask is, when they're in the midst of a memory, when they're going through the pain of it, because you want to also keep them grounded because they're going back there. I just keep asking, tell me what happened. So what are you seeing? Tell me what happened. That's almost all what I'm doing during that, because then it can help move that memory. A lot of times they'll be able to tell you, a lot of times they won't. Okay. And so I'm just transcribing whatever they say. So that's as much as I go. Okay. So I don't believe you should be doing hypnosis. I don't believe you should be doing guided imagery. I really don't believe in guided imagery. And for complex trauma like this, I don't believe EMDR is effective. That's my bias. I've been trained in it. I could be certified. If you're a therapist and do EMDR, or if you are a client and you've had good success, you know what? That's good. And I honestly mean that. I don't want to get close to anything dealing with the subconscious where I trigger that. So I just want people to know that that's how I am. Okay, so wouldn't I remember some kind of trauma if it happened? Not initially, but eventually it'll come up. Isn't it normal to not have such memory? No. In brief, no. Okay, I will normalize it, and you don't have it for a reason. I mean, if something big happened, wouldn't you remember it? No. That's what about an adult that's been through something significant and they have amnesia? Right? Do you question why somebody has amnesia? No, it just means, and let's say they don't have head trauma. Okay. We all can probably appreciate it. As a matter of fact, if you ask the average person, if you say somebody in the hospital has amnesia, that they got in a car accident, somebody died in that car accident next to them, their grandson, their spouse, their child, the person doesn't have head trauma, but they have amnesia. If you were to ask the average person, what do you think that amnesia is about? Most people will give you the right answer. It's like, oh, it's just overwhelming, and they can't see it yet. And so it's okay. At some point in time, somebody's going to have to break the news. So could any of this actually be true, right? That's when it's starting to, could any of it, like basically this can't be true. Could any of this actually be true? That's that processing, right? If a part of you is still asking that, wrestling with it, doesn't mean good, it doesn't mean you're good, better, indifferent. It means you're aware, you're in that beginning or early stage, okay? So these questions will be resolved by the time, and in order to, it'll happen naturally, but by the time all these are resolved, you will be moving into that next stage because it means it's sinking in. How is it that these things are happening? That is everything from body memories to lack of memory, to meaning the dissociation, to the the parts, you're hearing the voices, you're having body memories, you're having the flashes. It's the whole ball of wax, so to speak, the whole 9 yards. We'll go with 9 yards, right? And football, by the way, every 10 yards, you get another down. So if you've ever heard, the whole 9 yards, that's actually where this comes from. Okay, so it's very normal to say, no, this can't be happening to me. How is it that these things can be happening? That's really that shock and denial, right? That's different than the word denial in AA. Denial is more than a river in Egypt. This is just, I'm still defended. It's like, I can't believe this, no. How can this, okay? It just means it's still trying to sink in. That's really what the beginning stage of therapy is all about. It's just trying to sink in. You can't force it, but you can keep it going at a certain regular pace, but you can get stuck there for years, if not decades, okay, by backing away. There's another question. So you can see these are all kind of facets, very similar. How do I make sense of this, right? And you can't fault the person. This is very normal. Wouldn't you be asking this if you're the therapist, if this happened to you? Right? So it's just, you can see that all these questions are kind of facets of the same thing, like in essence, shock and denial, and you got to be crapping me, you got to be kidding me. Okay. So it's sinking in the beginning stages, it's just sinking in. And this is true. And therefore, what I'm experiencing, what I remember, and the voices and the parts, it's all going to happen at the same time. There's a very much a correlation between the extent to which I accept the parts and the extent to which I accept that what I'm seeing, what I'm experiencing is real. It really happened. Okay. That is an invisible, that's like the sound barrier. The jet is getting speed, and it's going to cross the sound barrier at the 40. So that's really where you're heading to, where when it sinks in. And that's a horrible moment when it sinks in, but I tell you what, it's crucial, and you can make it through it. And right, how could this be what it looks like? Because what's happening, remember, everything from like the timeline map, dot to dot, just like the movie Tangled, where the little tiles started to come together, they started to paint a picture. And when all of it coalesced, when all of it came together, the meaning and the implications, when she saw everything, what happened? It blew her against the bureau, her dresser. Now, I'm not saying this is going to blow you literally, physically backwards, but the impact, the shock wave, when this comes together, you go through the sound barrier, right? When this comes together, it rocks your world, because now it's hitting home. And that's that last question. I think that's the last question. How could this be what it looks like? That's that process kind of question. These are all process questions. But if you still have any of these questions, just so you know, you're down at that end of the field. If you're a therapist working with somebody, you've got to get all these questions answered. These are process questions. And if your client is still wrestling with any of these, just know you don't want to progress further, because all your work is going to be cyclical. All your work parts are going to snatch them away. The firefighters are going to snatch the memories that are going to come up. And that's why I'm convinced you don't want to tap into the unconscious too soon by guided imagery or Colin Ross has done such good work, right? But for me, for hypnosis, anything like that, because it's bypassing these questions. This is part of the grief and loss process, to be honest, right? The whole thing is grief and loss as you're working through this, but you have to come out of the shock and denial phase to begin to get in touch with your anger. It's the stages of grief and loss. Okay, so let me go back. So those are pretty much the questions behind the question behind the issue, the questions that have to be settled during that early stages. They're always under the surface. So if you still have these questions, I don't want to discourage you. I just want you to know maybe why you're not making progress. Okay, so force yourself. This is where journaling is so important. This is where venting. Okay, venting is going to help force the reality to sink in. Okay, so what's going to hinder you? What's going to hold you back? We've already looked at some of them, but here we go. So early stage hindrances, fear of being weak. Very similar kind of list to what we've looked at, some of the ambivalence, but okay, so these are the things that cause you to be stuck. So your fear of being weak. If you haven't been able to adequately satisfy that answer for you to where you understand you're not weak, right? You're not going to be able to keep up the same pace of things and the routines and the responsibilities. You have to pare things back. Okay, but you're not going to be your old self. So you have to get rid of the idea that you are weak. You're not. So just have to, gotta let that go. I mean, you're gonna have to wrestle through it. But if you fear, because what's gonna happen? It's gonna get worse before it gets better. And if you think not being able to be as quick and competent and on top of it and holding things together makes you weak, then what are you going to do? You're going to stop and you're going to move backwards. You're going to package everything up, so to speak, put it in a box, and it's going to get worse. Okay. Fear of letting people down by not being as strong. You can see very similar things. So if you fear letting people know that you're having a difficult time, as a matter of fact, I just had a referral, and bless her heart, she mentioned that she hasn't told her spouse. I don't know. My hunch is he's not a perpetrator, but she doesn't know. She doesn't know. I'll try it again. He doesn't know. And this, I've had a number of clients, but the spouse doesn't know that um, her husband doesn't know that she's seeking therapy. Okay. So guess what I'm going to do the first session? We're going to tackle that. Not, oh, pardon the pun, that's football analogy, but not tackle. Well, we're going to address that. Why? Because you can't do this work if if you don't want people to notice. You can't. It's just not going to work. Now, if you're by yourself, okay. But if people live with you, now, what about kids? And the younger the kids, you're still going to have to normalize things, and we can work with that. There's a lot of things that I work with my clients that, okay, what do you begin to tell your kids? How do you begin to normalize it? Well, let me ask you this, by the way. Do you think they don't notice? That's why you're thinking about therapy, right? Because they've already noticed it. So it's actually going to come as a relief, to be honest. So you're already right. That's where you already have guilt. Aren't you letting, I hate to even phrase it this way, right? But using that same verbiage, aren't you already letting people down? I don't believe you're letting them down, but don't you feel guilty for, right? That's okay. So you're doing it right now. So trust me, by letting them know you're looking to get help, assistance, you're looking for a coach, is going to be a relief to them because they're starting to worry about you. They may not even be telling you, but can't you see it in their face? Can't you sense it that they're starting to worry about you? Then that creates that guilt. Now you got it, right? You got the cyclical guilt trip going on. Fear of extended therapy. We talked about that. If it gets worse before I get better, am I going to be in therapy for the next 25 or 50 years? No. If you drag the process out, you might be. So if you have a reasonably competent therapist, right, thinking in terms of about 3 years, if you're working at this every day, what does that mean? You're doing the journaling, you're doing the internal system map, you're venting, you are or all the different things I talked about. You're communicating with your therapist as stuff starts to come up. Oh, you're reading your journal in therapy. You're doing drawings and you're showing them to the therapist. Okay, you need to be showing the therapist what you're drawing. Why? Because he or she needs to know. The parts, okay? If you're resisting talking to the parts, if you're resisting getting to know them, those are all the things that are going to extend therapy. So just as we talked about the hindrances and things will cause somebody to stop. Fear of being crazy, we looked at that before. That'll be a hindrance, right? If you're listening to this, you're probably not crazy. Why? Because you're on Emma's channel. You're on my channel. If you're looking at the condensed version, by the way, if you're watching this on my channel, you notice you don't have the answers to the questions because I want to honor Emma. So you have to go to Emma's channel to get the full version. Okay, fear of going crazy, a little bit different. Fear of being crazy, or I may not be crazy now, but I feel like I'm going to go crazy. Right? Those are reasonable, by the way. The fact that you fear you are going crazy or you're going to go crazy, that makes you not crazy, but you're not going to go crazy. But if you don't do anything, then probably what's going to happen, things are going to become more unmanageable. Fear of imagining all this. This is very common, right? You know what? I think I watch too many movies. I have an active imagination. I just, this can't be. It's just all me. And right, we've talked a little bit about this. The difference between an active imagination or too many movies is you won't have a visceral response like it's happening to you, right? You have recall. Um, I don't watch scary movies. I don't watch horror movies, but if I have in the past, but when I remember, okay, most people now all of a sudden they don't like being in the dark. Right? They're a little more jittery, but there's a big difference between that versus terror. There's a big versus like feeling like I'm in that horror movie. Big difference. I've never once suddenly felt like I'm in a horror movie. Right? Big qualitative difference. So if you feel like it's happening to you, and if you're waking with nightmares or night terrors, or your heart's pounding when you wake up, okay, and it keeps happening, and it's this repetitive thing, and it's a memory that keeps coming up so much so you keep sleeping in the closet, right? Or you're just paranoid. Probably more than just an active imagination. Oh, this is a big one. Fear of family disruption. I'm thinking extended family. Okay. It's already disrupted your family, probably your immediate, if you have a spouse, if you have a partner, if you have kids. That's a reasonable fear. Why? If you fear family disruption, that means there's some sort of enmeshment. That means there's some sort of lack of boundaries. You fear family disruption if your family somehow is involved and you're going to start distancing yourself, or you're going to start to do something different, and they might start to ask questions. And the question is this: what are you afraid of? Why does it even come to your mind? Why is it going to impact them? And why aren't they going to be okay with it? Aren't they supportive of you? Don't they want your best interest in mind? Don't they honor your preferences? If will they make you feel guilty? Will they ask a lot of why questions? If it's even hard for you to begin to imagine, to state your preference, or to start to back off, or not think about getting a fake gift for your mother, a guilt-ridden gift for your mother for Mother's Day, or if you wish you could just not show up for certain functions, why don't you be honest? So I don't care if you come out of a kind of whacked out or dysfunctional family all the way to a really perpetrating family. You should be able to be honest. That's part of the goal. Remember, boundaries and knapsacks, right? So either way, we all should be able to be honest with our family. But look at how I wrote that: family disruption. So you're not going to go with them on vacation. Should that disrupt things? So you're not going to go over for Mother's Day. Should that disrupt? Think about that term. If you feel like it's going to disrupt things, there may be a reason why. How about if truth starts to come up? Oh, now you're rocking the boat, man. You're creating a little tectonic shift. We've got some earthquakes going on. It's almost like you watch their response, and it's just not, oh, okay, well, yeah. They may say, well, oh, you sure? But they're not going to say, what? They're not going to give a lot of pushback. The more pushback they give, the question is this: why are they giving pushback if they really care about you and your best interest? Okay, so either way, you know what? Disrupt the family. But if truth and your preference disrupts the family, you got a really whacked out a dysfunctional family. What happened in the movie Tangled? Truth came out. Did it disrupt the family? It was long overdue, wasn't it? So guess what? Disrupt away. Doesn't mean you're mean and nasty, but for you to have a voice, if that disrupts things, then what's the alternative? You're going to keep being a doormat, be a slave without a voice? That means you're existing in a cult. You're in a Nazi concentration camp. You don't have to be there anymore. Okay. You need to watch my series on boundaries on survivorsport.net under the podcast tab. Okay. Fear of family disloyalty, very similar, right? If they give you the sense that you're disloyal, what is that about? That's not about you. That's about them. What, to have your own voice, your own preference? Do you have your own space? Start your own life? Whoa, what's this loyalty thing? Well, blood is thicker than water. You can choose your family, but you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family, right? Really? Blood is thicker than water. Whose blood? You need to watch my series on boundaries. Think about knapsacks. One knapsack, no more, no less. Everybody needs to carry their own knapsack. What is that? Doing what is right, just, and fair. Give them back their responsibility to do what? For them to do what is right, just, and fair. Why is it always you having to keep the peace? What happens if you speak truth? Oh, your mother does what? Oh, your father does what? They give you the look. They do what? Who said that's the position you have to be in? Where was this written in stone? Oh, we may be getting a little closer to the issue. Family loyalty. What do you have? A organized crime family going on? How about this? Person should leave father and mother, cut the apron strings, and cleave to your own spouse. If you don't have a spouse, how about just, developmentally growing up and being able to have your own life? And if they consider that disloyal, I want to know this. This is really in the working stage. This is what needs to accomplish. How about this? What's in it for you? Because you're giving and putting up with and tolerating, and you're everybody's slave. You're everybody's. You make everybody happy. You keep the peace. Okay. When's it going to be your time? And when are they ever going to write you a thank you note? When's it ever going to be enough? And I'll tell you exactly what. They're never going to say it, and they're never going to let you off the hook, and they're never going to thank you, and they're never going to say it's enough. They don't intend to. Why? They're stringing you along. Forget this loyalty. It's feigned loyalty. How about loyalty to you and your growth and your healing? They want you stuck. They want you quiet. They want the secrets pushed down. It is time for you to be able to finally have a life. Give back knapsacks. It's time. And I think, yeah, there we go. Okay, so that has probably been enough. That's early stages. I may have a few other things about the early stage, but that's probably good enough. And again, thinking about the early stage, as a matter of fact, Emma, I will bring, where are we here? No, I'll bring this back. No, we're right there. Okay, so I'm going to go backwards real fast. So stay here, Emma. Right, we're just going to, there we go. Okay, so think about there. We've just talked about the early stage. Okay, but what are we going to move on to? We'll bring it back. Bear with me as I do the PowerPoint. All right, there. Okay, so, oh, sorry, I've lost everybody. Okay, so we're eventually going to begin to get into the working stage. And what happens in the working stage? That is where we will eventually, with the parts, that's when we're going to get into the firefighters. That's where we're going to get into working with the scripts, as it were, working with the programming. Okay, so that's where we're heading. And then we're going to look at the chart, and then we're going to really unpack what are the different things they did, what are the pretty typical ways in which they program, as it were, still using that. Okay, I'll get out of this. Well, Emma, you have, you and your viewers been a trooper, our viewers. So that's kind of the lay of the land, where we are on the field, so to speak, looking at the early
That was
stage.
great. Really cool how you're able to take lessons and sort of apply them to things that we're familiar with. So it makes it easier to understand. A lot of us obviously haven't gone through what a lot of the trauma survivors have that you work with, John, but we can look at a football field and understand and comprehend that. So it's really helpful how you're able to sort of give us metaphors and other ways to understand this other than just through, I guess, words. These pictures really help, and these graphs are super creative that you're doing. So Thank you for putting that together and taking the time. I don't know where you find the time. I know you're busy from morning to night and it's super late where you're at right now. But we're super grateful. Like I said, it's like getting free therapy sessions from you every week.
Well, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there, and that really is the reason, Emma, we're doing it and I'm doing it. Um, that's why it's free, right? We want people to get healed. And so
Yeah.
everything I do is always free just because that's my own mission. I'm getting a little older now, and I want to be able to let as many people know how they can be free. Right. So this is my contribution. I'm trying to help.
Well, we're super grateful. And I'm going to bring up, I know you went through survivor support a little bit, but I'm going to bring up your contact info. That way you can share with people how to get in touch with you. So I'll let you guide people through what's important to know about your websites and your podcast pages.
Yeah. Again, we already looked at this, but the way to use this as an adjunct, right? If you're stuck in between sessions, just start from left to right. There's plenty of information to peruse, to read. This series, by the way, is right there. Drop down 4, the impact of trauma. So again, Emma's channel has the questions and answers. Mine has the more abbreviated version. That's also where the 2 charts is the inner part and the one on psychopaths. But again, and then there's actual, if you go all the way down, we've seen Help for the Journey. If you or somebody you know is in crisis or needs to find a treatment program, these are real links and real contact information. Insights tab, Insights 2, Insights got too big. I had to break it up between 1 and 2. Ton of information. You'll never run out. I'll just say it that way. You will never run out of information to be able to prompt thought and to journal about. So there's no reason why, and I'm not faulting anybody. I had a client today. It never bothers me. I never want to shame any of my clients if they come to session without having done any journaling. But what does that give me a sense as well? More times than not, I can lovingly say, now whether I say it to them or not, but I know if somebody comes to session without having journaled at all, what do you think the reason is? And so if anybody's been with us, right, they haven't journaled because they're normal and they don't like pain, but they're probably where on the football field? The beginning stage, because they're not journaling at all. Now, do I say, I can't believe it. You look, you had all week to journal. I never, because I don't fault them because I just know they're not there yet. But I also know that they're not there yet. And let's say one day they don't, but let's say one day they say, you know what, I just don't know if I'm getting anything out of therapy. I just think I'm going to put it on hold. I just don't think, well, I then can say, yeah, okay, well, you have my name and number, but I'm just kind of wondering if maybe a part of you is fearing that this could get worse. Now, why would I ask that question? I know where they are in the field. And I also know what? They haven't made peace with their parts. I know that 100%. That's why they're not journaling. Now, do I fault that? No, I use that as insight to be able to help ask those kind of questions, to be able to wait until if they've used up 40 of their 50-minute session. It's very normal. It happened today as I was working with a client. Some people would say, well, Euler, John, you need to jump in sooner at times, but I was waiting and not passively because sometimes somebody needs a little downtime. They just need to, but it was going on and we're about 10 minutes until session ended and she was staying far away from anything. And so now I was able to ask what? I'm wondering, tell me where you're at. What are you hearing right now on the inside? Why am I doing that? Because she's been avoiding for a week. She's been avoiding what? Doesn't make her good, better, and different. It makes her very normal. But because I know the football field, I know that she has been avoiding the idea of parts. So it just can be helpful to kind of get a sense. Then I can encourage her saying, you know what, I know you're feeling like dropping out if you really want to. I'm not going to tell you what to do and I'll support your freedom of choice. But I just want you to know that it might get worse, right? I can kind of give her that bird's eye view of where she's at so that she can make an informed decision. Okay, under the blog, that links to survivorsupport.us. Under the podcast tab, that's podcasts I reference, so my Friday night podcast. And the link we're on the homepage, if you scroll down, there is a contact box. So if you want to shoot me a question or anything like that, you can just scroll down far enough and you'll see it. But if you want to schedule a session, that's right there. I think on a couple of these pages, I have contact box. By the way, my full bio, my biography is under the home tab under About, if you ever want to read my full bio. There we go. Okay, churchprotect.org, that's more my training and research site. Truths About Predators have a lot of my clinical insights, so to speak. And under Insights, you can see I had to split it out. That's where I will have screenshots of some of my social media, primarily Twitter. I'm getting older. I guess only old people use Twitter. I just can't keep up. I've got a Telegram account. I can't even figure out how to use it. I must be getting old. Instagram, all those. If anybody wants to donate their time, by the way, I would love to turn, if you can help me. So there's a little trivia. That could be a good way you could support me once I vet you to make sure you're the real deal. But that would, if somebody wants to help me get my stuff on that would be a real needed thing. If you want to help me have a Twitter or Instagram or any other thing that I don't even know about. So there you go. I'm technologically social media challenged. So, but the reason I'm not on those is I just don't have time. So if anybody would like to come along and help me create or recreate some of the stuff, that would be wonderful. Okay. What else are we looking at? Maybe the YouTube. Oh, I've got Unmasking the Trans Movement. So that is an actual site in and of itself. Now, I've got different .com, so survivorsupport.net, churchprotect.org, and unmaskingtransmovement.com. And the predators love the trans movement. So really, that's why I speak to those issues, to unmask perpetrators, to keep women and children safe. We have episodes. Sometimes the episodes on this page are a little behind, but a lot of information, including Dr. Ann Gillies. You can find her newsletter. You have access to my blog right on there. You can contact us through there. But probably, if you want to see the most updated episodes, I would recommend go to our YouTube page. And what we're doing, we are now we're 3 weeks into a live Sunday night program. It will be consistent. So along with everything else I've been doing, Sunday nights. Can't believe I talked myself into this, or let Brad, he had Brad Wilder, our host, he's a go-getter. He had a massive heart attack, surgery, but he's back at it. He's a hockey coach. He's a 40-year media guy, and he's a wonderful guy. We all volunteer our time, but he said, hey, we need to do this. So we're really now adding podcasts via the live podcast. So what I'm now doing is I then have to manually, because it's just not user friendly. So I have to record everything we're doing, but I'll get it up on the regular channel. But if you go to live, this is what you see. If you go to home, you won't see these live. So they're a little behind what I'll be doing. So there's probably just one up there. So they'll be up there. So part 1 is up there, but 9 o'clock to 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time every Sunday night. You can join us. We have a live guest, and you can ask questions. And I've asked it before, and Emma, I think I should say thank you to your viewers. But we're up to 516 subscribers, but we're only up to 516. Whether I did this or not, this is worth, when I see what's out there, we should have 1.5 million subscribers. This is, I think, and I'm trying to be objective, but this is some of the best clinically fact-based and presentable and digestible material that I know of. And it does, so please, look, we are with Alvin Louis. He's been on all sorts of programs. We got 133. I recommend everybody, if you want to know the tactics of the perps that try to shut parents' mouths down, what tactics do they use? Alvin goes through it. So if you, he's done a wonderful job. He distilled it. For instance, what are you going to face if a trans activist starts running their mouth at you, whether on a school board or at a picket or drag queen story hour? Or it's probably going to be 3 or 4 very typical things they're going to say in order. Do you know what those are? We bring that out. So it really is good information. So are you familiar with the Cass report that came out? Dr. Cass in England. It really did a tectonic shift. You know what that is? If you don't, it's because you haven't listened to 3 episodes ago. I reviewed that. So we give you really good information on there. How about intersect? I'm just looking at that one right now. Do you know if somebody says, oh, but you know, what happens is within the trans movement, a lot of us are intersect, and what you're doing is you're keeping us from getting the help we need. You're denying us health care. You hate intersect people, intersex. Do you know how to respond to that? Do you know how many intersex people there are? You would if you listened to episode 26, because our guest, Jeremy, is an intersex individual. He'll give you the stats. So we got a lot of good, Diana Kenny. So we've got a lot of good, she calls it the greatest medical scam of the century. You know why she can say that? So these are heavy duty questions. So there we go. So that's available to you all. I guess my own YouTube channel, I've got playlists, but I just in successive order, whatever I'm working on. I have kind of given different thumbnails now to Emma's in my program because I don't want to steal her work, actually. So I've got those up to a point, but Emma's in my program are here, including anything in successive order. The one right there, for instance, examining psychopathy. I was recently on a program called Waking the Dead. Quite the title, but so we discussed psychopathy. I do have playlists. So if anybody wants to be able to find categories of stuff I talk about, it's right there. And Emma, what else? I guess just Twitter page.
And then we got your Twitter.
And the Twitter. So whenever I see a newsworthy article, I will either just retweet it or I will make commentary. So here's one. As a matter of fact, this is a good one, right? So this guy, this shows you the perps. Okay, we're going to quote, oh, F it. This is a perp. What do I have to lose? So you know he was in a back and forth exchange. I'm deactivating anyway. So this is what this little mind enjoyer. Okay, I'm a pedophile, technically a hebephile. What a bunch of little liars. But that feels like making excuses. I don't know if this was caused by my father's abuse or inherited as a genetic trait. There, that's my last secret. My veins laid bare. That's a perp. Okay, so my response, the rats and cockroaches, the deviant AGPs, furries, and pro-porn pushers and other perps and their apologists who hide their identity on Twitter, that's a key red flag, while trolling against those of us who take a high bar approach toward protecting minors are jumping ship. So you'll see a lot of that. So that's what I bring up, news articles and other things like that. So that's my Twitter page.
Which is super helpful because not everybody has the time to sort of dive into all the different aspects of what you cover, John, between the trans movement, the church, the survivor movement. You know, you're really good at putting it all in one place for all of us. So if you guys want to keep up to date with kind of what's in the news and with what John's doing daily, whether he is filming a podcast, whether he's going live, and or if he's posting a podcast on his channel or adding anything to his websites, he's always really good about posting that. That way you guys can go check it out as it's coming out and get the fresh new of the day. So I definitely encourage you guys to go follow him on Twitter if you're eager to hear more podcasts that John goes on and to just keep up with his day-to-day life. And then also, like I said, if you don't have time to scour the news to see sort of what's going on in the survivor, church, and trans news, John's really good at posting all of that for us. Plus you'll get to see John's savage side as he goes head to head with some of the most nasty perps on the internet who find him and attack him. So you guys will get to see you know, John standing up for survivors and using all of this knowledge against people, and they really don't know what to do with it. And like he said, Soylent Green, Lucian Greaves, if you want to come debate, let's do it.
Absolutely.
Finally, since you ditched us the last time that we
I'm
asked.
learning more. I'm learning more about Lucius or Lucian or whatever his name is. So yeah, running this 50c3. So I'm learning more about this whole Ponzi scheme, quite frankly, that Lucius has. So Lucius, if you want to come on, Lucian, whatever your name is, Lucian, if you want to, and that's not your name, Brian or whatever, I'm learning. Right, but if he wants to talk about this little fraudulent 501c3 of his, right, so he doesn't have to pay taxes, come on, absolutely, we'll have a talk.
We'll have a talk. And John's Twitter also has all of his links, so I'll have them in the show notes. But again, if you guys are on Twitter, John's a great resource on there. And I definitely encourage you guys to go follow his YouTube channels, to also go scour his websites. Like he said, hours and hours and hours of free video, of free therapy, essentially, and free learning. And you guys will get to, on his YouTube channel, you guys will get to listen to some of the specialists, the sort of most prestigious people out there talking about these different issues that John covers. He invites on his show and collaborates with. So you guys will get to hear some of the leaders in the community speaking out on these too, and get to find new people through John. So it's awesome that he's doing this for us. John has a really busy life. He's literally busy morning to night, you know, helping. And so it's a blessing that he takes time out of his schedule to do free stuff for us. So I definitely encourage you guys to go dig into that, especially on survivorsupport.net, where he has just hours and hours and hours and hours of video on all kinds of topics to help you guys with healing. Go check that out. Follow him on Twitter. John, I appreciate you again putting together these incredible presentations, for all that you do for the community, for all that you do for your clients, you know, and for taking the time to share. You're really a wealth of knowledge with your interesting background working in solitary confinement, and then on the opposite end with, you know, extreme trauma survivors. It's really, really fascinating and important that we learn both of these sides, you know, and it's cool that we get to learn it from the same person and get to sort of combine those worlds together and understand how they work together. This has been really, really healing doing this, and I look forward to having you back again next week so we can dig more into this and, of course, get back to the systems and parts and see how it all coincides. So just thank you for being here again.
More than welcome. And I commend everybody, whoever's been staying with this whole series, that congratulations that you're dedicating yourself to your own healing. So that's wonderful.
And share this with people. Like I said in the beginning, this is a really great playlist, and John's channels are awesome to share with people who are sort of just waking up or looking for healing. There's a lot of great resources that you guys can also share along with using for yourself. So definitely take advantage of that and help us get the word out. The stuff is pretty censored, just like how he said with his Unmasking the Trans Movement YouTube channel. These channels don't get bumped up in the algorithms, so it's really us that has to do the guerrilla marketing, the sharing, the promoting. And so all of your shares, all of your subscriptions, they might not seem like a big deal to you, but they do wonders to help us sort of break out of those algorithms and reach new people. So keep it up, you guys. Go get John's follow count up even more on both of his YouTube channels. Go check out his free content. I'll have all my links in the show notes too. Keep in touch every way you can, just in case there's things that happen, or in case you guys leave a platform, or if we get kicked off. Keep in touch as many ways as you guys can. That way you guys can be there when we get established again, or if we have to move. So you guys, thank you so much for tuning in. God bless you, and we will see you next time.